The feed gave me 3 true lines every morning, and never the one detail that would have made them safe to act on. I woke at 16 in Chongram Academy, where a student at 0 stops owning his choices. My name is Han I-jun, and at 29 I read insurance policies for a living. Chongram does not sort its students so much as originate them, and it took me a year to find the clause. They built a room with no floor. I handed 900 children a ruler. Punch the like button and ring the subscribe bell so you stay in the loop. Every click moves the needle. How did someone like me get this far? It started with a single moment. The shuttle smells like new upholstery and somebody's citrus scum, and I am 16 years old, which is a problem. The last thing I remember is being 29 and falling asleep at a desk with a claims file open in front of me. And now my hands are wrong. They are the hands of a boy who has never held a pen for 11 hours straight, unscarred across the knuckles, the nails clipped short by somebody else. I turn them over twice in my lap while the highway slides past the window and the other students talk over each other about dorm assignments, and nobody looks at me once. That is the only good news I have so far, so I decide to keep it by not making a sound. The uniform I am wearing has a crest on the breast pocket, 2 crossed keys over an open book, and the name stitched under it belongs to a school I have never applied to. Chongram Academy. I know the name the way you know a brand you have never bought, which is to say I know it costs something, and I know it is supposed to mean something. Past that, I have nothing at all. No memory of an application or an interview or a single conversation that would explain why this body is on this bus. Then the text arrives inside my eye, and the question of how I got here stops being the largest thing in the vehicle. It does not arrive on a screen because there is no screen. 3 lines of pale blue letters simply exist in the middle of my vision, hanging over the seat back in front of me, patient as a sign at a train platform. My first coherent thought is that a stroke would almost certainly hurt more than this, which is the sort of reassurance that does not survive contact with a second thought. The first line tells me a girl named Gu So-young has decided to sit next to me before the shuttle reaches the gate. The second tells me a boy named Bai Dusik has decided to ask me for money within his first day of meeting me. The third says the opening assembly will end in a demonstration that most of the incoming class will misread. Underneath all 3, in smaller letters, it says the feed updates at 8 each morning and reports only on people who have already made a decision about me. I read it 3 times, then closed my eyes and opened them, and it is still there. Somewhere behind my ribs, a very old professional instinct wakes up and starts asking the only question that has ever mattered, which is not whether this is real. It is what the thing costs. Nothing pays out 3 times a day for free, and I spent 7 years reading policies written by people whose entire job was making the exclusions look like the benefits. If there is one thing I would put this borrowed life on, it is that a promise this clean has a clause underneath it somewhere. A girl sits down next to me with her bag on her knees and her hair pushed behind one ear, apologizing for the seat, saying the ones at the back were taken. She asks whether I mind, and I tell her I do not. She introduces herself as Gu So-young, says she is first year the same as me, and asks whether I am nervous. Her voice does a small warm thing at the end of every sentence, the verbal equivalent of holding a door. 2 seats ahead, a boy turns half around to look at her, and then pretends he did not. I tell her my name is Han I-jun, and that I am not nervous, which is a lie, and she laughs like it was a joke the 2 of us made together. So the feed is accurate. I file that away and keep my face doing the thing faces do when somebody friendly is talking to them. She asks whether I have read the enrollment packet, and I tell her I have not had the chance, and she says nobody has. 40 pages of legal language, and 1 page of anything useful, she says, and the useful page is about the ledger, and then she watches me while she says the word. It is a very small thing, the watching, half a second at most, and if I were actually 16 I would have missed it completely. Because at 16 you do not yet know that people test you with words the way a doctor taps your knee. I ask her what the ledger is, in the tone of a boy who genuinely does not know. She tells me it is how Cheongram tracks students, that everyone starts the same and it moves from there. That her older cousin came through here and said not to worry about it in the first month. Then she changes the subject to the dormitories and asks whether I have seen the room photographs. Her whole face open and pleasant, and she does not blink for slightly too long. She did not answer my question. She answered a different one, gently, and moved us along so smoothly that a normal 16-year-old would have walked off this shuttle believing he had been told something. The gate comes up on the right, and it is not a gate so much as a wall with a decision cut into it. Gray stone, no ornament, a single opening wide enough for 1 vehicle, and beyond it a long avenue of trees planted the same year at the same distance from each other. Whoever designed this place wanted arrival to feel like passing a checkpoint rather than walking up a drive. I look at it and think about airports, about that long corridor between the plane and the desk where somebody asks you your business. Gu So-young says it looks like a prison and laughs and says she is joking. I tell her it looks expensive, and she says that is worse, and that time she is not joking, and for exactly one syllable her voice is a completely different instrument. Then it is gone and she is asking me about club sign-ups. The assembly hall seats the entire first year and does not fill. 900 and change by my count of the rows. In a room built for twice that. Either the academy shrank, or it was built to look like something it has never been. I take an aisle seat 2/3 of the way back, because 2/3 of the way back is where you can see the room, and the room cannot conveniently see you. I put my bag between my feet, and wait. A woman walks out to the lectern and does not tap the microphone or thank anybody for coming. She says her name is OK Gina, that she is the first-year director, and that she is going to explain the only thing about this school any of us will remember in 10 years. Then she explains the ledger, and the floor of my stomach goes quietly out from under me. Every student is issued a balance on enrollment, she says, and the balance is 12,000 marks. The marks are not money and cannot be spent outside the walls, and inside the walls they are the only thing that matters. Because standing at Chongram is not measured by grades and is not measured by conduct. It is measured by the balance, and she says that in the same voice she would use to point out the fire exits. Marks move 4 ways, and she gives us all 4 without hurrying. They can be wagered, student against student, on any contest the Academy sanctions, which turns out to be most of them. They can be lent at whatever interest the 2 parties agree between themselves, and the Academy will enforce the terms. They can be pledged as collateral against a loan, and they can be seized through a formal challenge when a debt goes unpaid. She lets that sit for 2 seconds, and then gives us the part that actually matters. A student whose balance reaches 0 is not expelled, because Chongram does not expel anybody. A student at 0 becomes insolvent, and an insolvent student's decisions belong to their creditor until the balance is restored. Where they sit and what they study, what clubs they join, what they say and to whom. The Academy does not police the arrangement beyond preventing physical harm, because the Academy's position is that a person who has surrendered their standing has surrendered the thing that made their choices theirs. Somebody 2 rows down starts laughing and stops when he realizes he is doing it alone. Graduation requires solvency, she adds. A student who leaves Cheongram insolvent leaves carrying the debt, and it is enforceable, and it does not expire. Nobody in the hall moves. 916-year-olds sit in a cold room and are told, in a pleasant administrative voice, that they have been handed a balance they do not understand. Then they are turned loose among 900 other people who do not understand it either. I look around at them, and most of the faces are doing excitement, and a boy near the front is already whispering to a friend with his hands making the shape of a plan. 3 seats over a girl is smiling at the stage as though she has been handed a prize. They heard a game. I heard the terms of a loan. Miss OK Gina says the first-year balances are already active, then says there will be a demonstration, and steps back from the lectern. 2 students come out from the wings, second year by the look of them, and stand a comfortable distance apart. One broad and one not. The broad one is introduced as holding paper on the other, a phrase nobody in the room has heard before and everybody understands immediately. The Academy has sanctioned a seizure challenge and the terms are read out. 900 marks against a wager of the same. 1 round, first concession ends it. It takes about 40 seconds, and the broad one never touches him. He simply walks at him, slowly, the way you walk at a dog you are not afraid of. The smaller one backs up and then says something too quiet for the microphone and puts his hand in the air. The hall makes a sound like a crowd at a bad play, and the entire first year decides in one motion that the lesson was about strength. I watched 900 people learn the wrong thing at the same time and finally understand what the third line of my feed was telling me. It was never about strength. The broad one never raised a hand. The term said first concession, and the smaller one conceded to a man who was doing nothing more aggressive than walking. The demonstration was about how cheaply a person hands over the thing they have just been told is theirs. When the room is watching and the alternative is being touched, they will remember the walking and they will not remember the terms. Miss Oak Gina comes back to the lectern, thanks the 2 students, and says absolutely nothing about what we have just seen. That silence is the second half of the demonstration, and I would put my entire balance on her knowing it. The dormitory is single occupancy, which I had not expected, and the room is better than the apartment I was renting at 29. That is a strange thing to be angry about, and I am angry about it anyway. There is a desk, a bed, a window that opens, a private bathroom, and a terminal on the wall that wakes when I come near it and shows me my name and a number. 12,000 marks, Han Eugen, first year. I stand in front of it for a while, then sit down on the end of the bed and do what I have done at the start of every job I have ever held. That is to stop looking at the product and start looking at the incentives. Chongram does not expel. Chongram enforces contracts between children. Chongram hands every incoming student a balance and then stands back and calls the result a measurement. And that is not a school, because a school has an interest in its own floor. This place has been built so that the floor belongs to somebody. Somewhere above all of it is a party who benefits from a graduating class that has already learned two things at 16. That standing is transferable, and that people will surrender it to a man who is merely walking toward them. I do not know who that party is yet, but I know the shape of the hole where they ought to be, and in my experience, the shape is enough to start with. There is a knock, and the boy in the corridor is grinning before the door is fully open. He introduces himself as Bae Dusik, says he is 3 doors down, says he has been going along the hall meeting everybody because somebody has to, asks whether I want to come and see the dining hall. Then, before I have answered any of that, he asks whether I could possibly spot him 200 marks until the weekend. He has already done something extremely stupid, and it is a great story. I look at him for a second longer than is comfortable, thinking about line 2 on the shuttle, delivered before I had ever seen his face. Within his first day of meeting me, I ask him what the extremely stupid thing was, and he tells me cheerfully and at length. He bet 400 marks on a coin toss against a boy from the room at the end, because the boy said he had a system, and Bae Dusik wanted to see the system. The system turned out to be that the boy owned the coin. He tells it like a joke he is making about himself rather than a description of being robbed. I ask whether he got the coin looked at, and he says he did not think of that. I ask whether the bet was registered with the academy, and he says he does not know what that means. So he lost 400 marks to a boy who understood the rules on the first afternoon, and now he is standing in my doorway laughing about it and asking me for 200 more. Here is what I learned about people like Bae Dusik across 7 years and several thousand files. They are not stupid so much as permeable. Whatever is nearest gets in, and it gets in without touching the sides, and they will hand you their last thing while telling you an entertaining story about how they lost the one before it. In a normal school, he grows out of it around 22, poorer and fundamentally fine. Here he is somebody's property by the middle of next month, and both of us are standing in a doorway where only one of us knows that. I tell him I will not lend him 200 marks, and his face does a small collapse and then repairs itself into the grin. He says that is fair, no problem. He will ask around, and he turns to go, and I hear myself say his name. I tell him I will not lend it to him, but I will pay him 200 marks for an hour of his time tonight. The hour is spent walking me through every person on this floor, who they are, where they came from, what they have already said about money in front of him. I tell him it is real work and I will expect it done properly, and he stares at me and asks whether that is a joke. I tell him it is not, that the 200 is his either way provided he actually talks for the full hour, that if the information is any good there will be more of this. He asks why anybody would pay for gossip. I tell him gossip is only what you call information when nobody has bothered to price it yet, and he thinks about that for approximately 1 second, which is 1 second longer than I expected. Then his whole face changes into something that is not the grin, and he says he will go and get his shoes. The corridor is quiet after he leaves, and my terminal glows on the wall with its 12,000 and its name. I have been in this world 9 hours. I have spent nothing and wagered nothing, and I have made 1 hire. Let the rest of them keep watching the boy who walks slowly at people. I will take the ledger. The feed arrives at 8, and I am awake at 7, sitting on the floor with my back against the bed, because I want to see the exact moment it appears. It arrives without any ceremony at all, 3 lines of pale blue hanging in the air above the desk. The first says a girl named Nam Yeren has decided to ask me for help before the end of the week, and the second says Bae Dusik has decided to tell somebody about last night. The third says a second year named Ryu Gante has decided that I am worth a look. I read the second one twice, because it does not say that he has decided to betray me, and it does not say that he has decided to sell me. He has decided to tell somebody, and the feed does not say who, or what, or whether it is a problem. That is the 4th time in 2 days the thing has handed me a true sentence, with the load-bearing wall taken out. There is the clause. I knew there would be a clause. The feed never lies, and it also never finishes. Every line I have been given is accurate, and every line omits precisely the detail that would let me act on it without exposure. Yu So-yang would sit next to me, and not why. Bae Dusik would ask me for money, and not that he had already been taken for 400 marks by somebody else. The assembly would end in a demonstration most of us would misread, and not 1 word about what the correct reading was. It is an information product, with the disclosures stripped out, and I spent 7 years on the other side of documents built exactly like this one, so I know what they are for. They are not built to lie to you. They are built to make you feel informed while you sign, which means the danger here was never that I would be misled. It is that I will be confident. I write the 3 lines out longhand in the back of a notebook, because a thing you cannot delete is worth more than a thing that hangs in your eye. Beside each one, I write the question it declined to answer. Then I go down to breakfast and find Bae Dusik already at a table with 2 other boys, talking with his hands. He sees me, lights up, calls me over, and one of the boys shifts along to make room. Before I have my tray down, he is telling all of them, with enormous enthusiasm, that I am the one who paid him 200 marks to talk for an hour. They should have seen it, he says. and he is apparently in the information business now. So that is what he decided to tell somebody. All of it, immediately, to everyone, with the delivery of a man doing a bit at a party. The two boys look at me and one of them laughs, and the other one does not. I watch him not laugh, and I watch him work out in real time that if information has a buyer, then information has a price. I see the exact second his eyes go somewhere else. Word will be across the first year by dinner, and whatever quiet I had is gone before the second morning, spent for me by a boy I hired specifically for his mouth. I sit down, pull my tray in, reach for the salt and let the smile come up on my face like it belongs there. I could not have bought that much advertising for 200 marks. Nam Yeren finds me on the third day, in the library at the table by the window, where I have been reading the enrollment packet properly. It is 41 pages, and Gu So Yang was right about the number and wrong about the useful page, because there is no useful page. There are 11 of them scattered, and they are scattered on purpose. The definition of a sanctioned contest sits on page 9. The definition of a registered wager sits on page 26, 17 pages away from the thing it modifies. The difference between the two is the entire reason Baydusik is out 400 marks. A wager is only enforceable if it is registered before the contest, which means an unregistered bet is not a debt at all. It is a gift. So Baydusik was never robbed in any sense the Academy recognizes, because he handed a boy 400 marks and then agreed out loud, in front of witnesses, that he had lost them. She stands at the edge of the table without sitting down, waiting to be noticed rather than announcing herself. And when I look up, she asks whether I am the one buying information. I tell her that depends entirely on the information. Nam Yeren is small and very still, and the stillness is the first thing about her. Everyone else in the school moves constantly, adjusting themselves, checking who is watching, and she stands with her hands at her sides and does not fidget at all. It reads as calm until you have looked at it for 4 or 5 seconds and understand that it is the stillness of somebody who has learned that movement gets noticed. She says she does not have information, that she has a problem, and that she was told I pay for problems, and she would like to know whether those are the same thing. They are not, I tell her, but I ask her to sit down anyway. She was insolvent by the end of the first day and not from a wager. She arrived with a balance like everybody else, and a girl she knew from her middle school met her outside the dormitory and explained that first years get their balances audited in the first week. The audit takes anything unspent as evidence of not engaging, the girl said, so the safe move is to park it with somebody who knows the system until the audit is passed. I ask whether she checked the packet, and she says the girl showed her a page. There is no audit and there is no such page. There is a paragraph on page 33 about balance review that describes something entirely different. Read quickly, in a corridor, with a friendly voice telling you what it says. It will hold together for as long as it needs to. So Nam Yeren parked 12,000 marks with somebody she trusted, and her balance is now 0. The other girl's balance is not, and the transfer was registered properly because the other girl made very sure of that part. She tells me all of this looking at the table rather than at me. I ask her what she wants, and she says she wants to know whether it can be undone. It cannot, and I know that before I have finished checking, and I check anyway, partly because I might be wrong, and partly because she has earned the 2 minutes. A registered transfer is final. There is no fraud provision anywhere in 41 pages, and I look for one twice before I tell her the truth. The marks are gone, and no rule in this academy is going to bring them back. She nods as though she already knew, and then she asks the second question, and the second question is the one that tells me who she actually is. She asks whether being insolvent means what Miss Okjina said it means. I have to tell her that it does, that as of now her decisions belong to the girl holding her paper, where she sits and what she studies and what she says and to whom. The academy will step in if somebody puts hands on her and will not step in for anything else, and this remains true until somebody restores her balance. Nam Yeren is quiet for a moment, and then she asks whether I would buy her. She says it the way you would ask about a bus route, with no tremor in it anywhere. She tells me the girl who took her marks has already started directing her and is visibly enjoying it, that she would rather be owned by somebody who wants work out of her than by somebody who wants the enjoyment. She is telling me this plainly, she says, because she has worked out that I am the kind of person who prefers plainly. I sit back and look at her and understand exactly what is being offered. 12,000 marks buys a person's decisions, and that is the market rate for a human being at this school. It is set by the enrollment balance, which means the academy did not merely permit that price. The academy printed it. The thing sitting across from me is 16 years old, has done the arithmetic on herself, and has arrived with a proposal. She understood before I did that in a place built like this. Choosing your owner is the last real choice anybody gets. Something in my chest has gone cold and flat, and I recognize the feeling, because it used to arrive when a file crossed my desk with a child's name in the claimant field. I tell her no. Her face does not change at all, and she stands and thanks me for my time, and she is already turning away when I tell her to sit back down. I tell her I will not buy her, and that instead I will lend her 12,000 marks at zero interest, registered, collateralized against nothing whatsoever. I am not going to hold her paper because I do not want it. That makes her solvent by tonight and makes her decisions hers again, and the debt will be real. I will expect it repaid, and I do not yet know how she is going to manage that. She asks why, and I tell her that a person who thinks clearly enough to price herself accurately is worth more to me solvent than owned. That I would rather be owed by her than own her. That is true, and it is also not the whole of it, and I do not say the rest out loud. She looks at me for a long moment while she decides not to cry in a library, and then asks very evenly what I want her to do. I tell her to go to every first year who has already lost their balance, and there will be more than nobody, and find out exactly how it was taken. Not who took it, but how. The script, the page they were shown, the words that were used, all of it written down and in my hands by the end of the week. She asks whether that is the repayment. No, I tell her, that is a job and I will pay her for it separately, and we will discuss the debt when she has something to pay it with. 12,000 marks, 6 days in. I would like to say I did that entirely out of goodness, and there is some in there. I am not going to insult either of us by pretending the rest of the ledger was not sitting in my head at the same time. A solvent Nam Yeren owes me, whereas an owned Nam Yeren has nothing left to lose by being useless. The girl who took her marks has already discovered that what she bought was a person who does not fidget. Debt is a better instrument than ownership and always has been, because ownership makes them yours and makes their failure yours along with them. She brings me 11 pages at the end of the week, handwritten and organized, and she has done something I did not ask for and would not have thought to ask for. She has sorted them by the shape of the lie rather than by the person telling it. There are 4 shapes, and that is all. 4. The first is the audit story, the one that took her, and it works on students who have not read the packet. The second is the coin, in several forms, which works on students who believe they are being clever and which never involves a registered wager. The third is the tax, where an older student explains that first years contribute a percentage to a club or a floor or fund that does not exist. It works because it asks for very little and asks repeatedly. The fourth is the favor, and the fourth is the only one that genuinely frightens me, because in the favor nothing is ever taken. Somebody helps you, and then helps you again, and then there arrives a moment where you are asked for something and refusing would make you a person who accepts help and gives nothing back. The price of not being that person turns out to be your balance. 31 first years have lost a meaningful part of theirs. In 6 days, 9 are at zero, and Nam Yeren has all 9 names and all 9 methods. 3 of the 9 were taken by the same girl. I read the pages twice and then sit back and let out a breath, because what is lying on this table is not gossip. It is an actuarial table. It is lost frequency by cause across a defined population over a defined period. And I built documents shaped exactly like this for insurers who paid a great deal of money for the privilege. Nobody in this school is going to pay for it, because nobody in this school knows yet that it exists. That is fine, and better than fine, because every genuinely good position I have ever seen started as something obvious that nobody had bothered to price. I ask her how she persuaded 9 people to admit they had been taken. She says she told them she had been taken too, and went first, and in detail, and that after that it was easy. I look at her across the table with her 11 pages and her folded hands. I do not think I lent that money to a charity case, and I think I lent it to the best hire in this building, and neither of us has quite said so out loud. Ryu Gante stops me outside the east stairwell on the 9th day, and he does it the way it ought to be done, which is not by blocking my path. He falls into step beside me and matches my stride close enough that changing direction would become a decision I would have to make visibly. He is second year and built like somebody who has been told at length that he is built like something. He says he has been hearing my name and that it is unusual to hear a first year's name this early. That when it happens, it is usually because the first year is losing spectacularly. Mine, he says, is not coming up that way. I tell him that is good to know. He explains that he represents an arrangement on the 3rd and 4th floors, and that the arrangement is simple, that first years who join it do not get taken by the 4 things I have apparently been writing down. So he knows about the 11 pages, 9 days, and there is nothing in this school that stays inside a room. He lays it out while we walk, and it is admirably clean. Members contribute a small standing percentage of their balance every month, and in return the arrangement makes it known that a member is a member, and members are not approached by anybody running a script. The people running scripts prefer targets who are not connected to anyone who would take an interest. I ask him what happens to a member who is approached anyway, and he says it is handled. I ask what happens to a first year who declines to join, and he says nothing happens, in a tone that is doing a very specific amount of work. Then he adds that the difficulty is that the people running scripts have no way of knowing who declined, and who was simply never asked, so a non-member ends up looking like everybody else. There it is, the entire product stated aloud and beautiful in its way. He is not threatening me at all. He is describing an unfortunate information asymmetry in the marketplace, one for which he bears no responsibility whatsoever, and offering to resolve it in my favor for a monthly percentage. I spent 7 years in insurance, so I know precisely what I am being sold, because it is the only product my industry ever sold. The only question that has ever mattered about it is whether the seller also controls the peril. I ask him, pleasantly, how the arrangement identifies its members to the people running the scripts, and he says there is a way. Then I ask whether that same channel could be used to identify a non-member, if somebody wanted that done. I ask it in exactly the tone he has been using with me, friendly and slightly bored. Ryu Gante stops walking. He looks at me properly for the first time, and I watch him revise something, and the revision is not upward. That would be flattering, and it is not what happens. What happens is that he moves me out of one category and into another, and the second category is one he has fewer scripts for. I see him decide to end the conversation before he is forced to improvise. He says the offer stands and that I should think about it, and he goes back the way we came. I keep walking with steady hands and a heart going hard enough that I can feel it in my throat. That was stupid. That was extremely stupid. And I did it because being clever in front of somebody feels like winning. It is not winning. It is spending. I bought 30 seconds of his discomfort with a piece of information he did not previously have, which is that I understand what the arrangement actually is. He did not know that when the conversation started, and he knows it now, and I paid the full price for the privilege of telling him. The feed said he had decided I was worth a look, and it said nothing whatsoever about what he does to people who look back. I write it into the notebook that night under the 9th day, and beside it I write the correction in the same handwriting I used for 11 years of audit notes. Do not ever perform. Being right in private is the entire product. The board is in the main hall, and it is the first thing I have seen at this school that is honest. It updates at midnight, names down the left, and balances down the right, first year and second year and third on separate panels. It does not rank anybody, it simply lists them in balance order, top to bottom, and lets the ordering do all the work. At the top of the third year panel, at the top of the entire hall, is a name with a number after it that does not make sense. Wai Seryong, 406,000 marks. I stand there long enough to become one of the people standing there, because there are always 8 or 10 of them, and I do the arithmetic twice. The enrollment balance is 12,000, and there are roughly 900 students in each year. If every student in this academy were stripped to 0, and the whole of it handed to one person, that is somewhere north of 30 million marks. 400,000 is not impossible on its face. But nobody takes evenly, and to hold 400,000 you would need to have taken the entire balance of 33 people. There are not 33 insolvent third years, because insolvency is public and this panel shows me the bottom of the board exactly as clearly as the top. And there are 6, which means she is not holding marks she took. She is holding marks she was given. I go and find Bae Duzik, who has by now become genuinely good at his job. People do become good at a job that is only an amplified version of what they already were. I ask him what students say about Wai Seryong. He says she is the reason the third year is quiet. I ask what that means, and he tells me that first years fight over marks constantly, that second years fight less, that the third year does not fight at all, and everybody assumes this is maturity. The second years with older siblings say it is not maturity. It is that at some point during third year it simply stops being worth it, because anybody who accumulates enough to matter ends up sitting across a table from her. She does not take their balance. I ask what she does instead, and he says she lends against it. There it is. She does not want their marks at all. She wants their paper because a student who has been stripped is finished and worth nothing to anybody. A student who is solvent and leveraged is an income stream, and an income stream that graduates still owes you. Because a debt at Chongram does not expire and walks out through the gate attached to the debtor. 406,000 marks is not a hoard, it is a book. She is not the richest student in this academy. She is its bank, and the number on the board is only the portion she has not currently lent out. I stand in the main hall in front of the one honest object in the building and feel something I have not felt since I arrived, which is professional recognition. It is not a warm feeling. I have spent 9 days quietly pleased with myself for noticing an information market nobody had priced. It turns out somebody has been running the credit market for 2 years, and the credit market eats the information market for breakfast. Somebody beside me asks whether I am new. The boy is my age and has appeared on none of Nam Yaren's lists, and his uniform is correct in a way that makes everybody else's look approximate. He says his name is Chan Baekyu, and he asks the question without any particular interest, the way you ask something in order to have asked it. I tell him I am first year. He looks up at the top of the board and says that everybody stands here doing the same sum. Then he says the sum is wrong and walks off without explaining which sum or why, and without looking back to see whether the line landed. I watch him go. He did not tell me that in order to help me, he told me because he was bored, and it cost him nothing. Somehow that is more alarming than anything Ryu Gante said in the corridor. A person who gives away good information for free is a person who needs none of this. And the feed has never once mentioned Sean Baekyu. If I have understood the rules of my own cheat correctly, that means he has not made a single decision about me in 11 days. 3 of Nam Yaren's 11 pages describe the same person, and not one of them names her. I do not see it the first time through. I see it on the second reading, a week later, sitting on the floor of my room with the pages spread out in front of me. What I notice is not a name but a rhythm. 3 of the 9 accounts of the fourth shape have an identical beat structure. Something small goes wrong for the target in the first few days, and somebody appears and fixes it, and the fixing is genuinely useful and costs the fixer something real. Then a second thing goes wrong and the same person fixes that too, and by then the target has begun describing this person to others as the one good thing about the school. The ask arrives on the third occasion, and it is never framed as an ask. It is framed as the target finally getting a chance to be useful in return. All 3 targets describe the fixer as warm, and 2 of them use that exact word, and none of the 3 will give Nam Yaren a name. All 3 say some version of the same sentence, which is that it was not like that and she did not mean it that way. They are still defending her. After she cleaned them out, they are still defending her, and that is the tell, because nobody in the history of this academy has ever defended the coin trick. I put my hand flat on the pages and sit there for a while. Then I get out the notebook and go back to the very first entry. The first morning. The shuttle, line 1. A girl named Gu So-yeon has decided to sit next to me before the shuttle reaches the gate. The feed reports only on people who have already made a decision about me, and that is the rule as stated, in the smaller letters, on the first morning. Which means that before the shuttle reached the gate, before she had seen my face, before I had done a single thing at this academy, Gu So-yeon had already decided something about me. I have been carrying that line around for 2 weeks believing it was an introduction. It was a notice of intent. I do not go to her. That is the first instinct, and I sit on it until it stops moving, because going to her accomplishes exactly one thing, which is that she learns I know. I have already made that mistake once this month in a corridor with Ryu Gante, and I am not going to buy the same 30 seconds twice. Instead, I do the boring thing, which is what I should have done from the beginning. I go and find the 2 targets who use the word warm, and I do not ask either of them about her. I ask them about the small thing that went wrong first, the very first problem, the one that got fixed. The first boy tells me his dormitory key stopped working on the second day, and he was locked out for 4 hours until somebody who knew the office staff got it sorted out. The second boy tells me his club registration was submitted incorrectly, and the deadline had passed, and somebody who knew the office staff got it fixed. I go back to Nam Yaren's third account and read it again, with my stomach already going cold. The third one says her class schedule had an error in it that took a week to correct, and that somebody helped. 3 targets, 3 first problems, 3 administrative errors. In a school that has not made a single administrative error in either of the 2 things I have personally filed. She is not finding people who have had bad luck. She is manufacturing the bad luck. She breaks the thing and then arrives to fix the thing, and every person she has taken is grateful to her, and the gratitude is not a side effect she exploits afterward. The gratitude is the product. It is built on purpose at the start, by the same hand that repairs it. I sit in the library with the pages in front of me, and have to work at keeping my face still, and what is moving through me is not fear exactly. It is the specific professional nausea of finding a fraud better designed than the industry it is stealing from. She sits down across from me 4 days later, in the middle of the afternoon, in the busiest part of the library, and the choice of setting is itself a statement. The feed had her at 8 that morning. Gu So-yeon has decided to tell me something true, and that was the entire line, and I have never received one like it. I spent the whole walk over trying to work out which half of it was missing. She sets her bag down and asks how my first month has been, and I tell her it has been educational. She says she has heard I have been asking around about administrative errors, and she says it lightly, with her chin on her hand and her whole face doing the warm thing. So somebody I spoke to went straight back to her, and of course they did, because they are still defending her. I tell her I have been asking about a great many things. She says she wants to tell me something true, that she is going to do it now. She thinks I have already got most of it, and people who have most of it and are still working are the ones who end up making a mess. Then she tells me the following, without any decoration on it at all. She is on partial fee remission, and partial is the operative word. The Academy's remission covers tuition and residence, and does not cover the enrollment balance. So a student on remission arrives with 12,000 marks exactly like everybody else, and nothing behind it. The difference between her and the boy at the end of my corridor is that when he goes to 0, he makes a telephone call. She says she is not going to 0, and she says it without any heat whatsoever. Then she asks whether I have noticed that everybody I have been asking about is on remission as well. I have not noticed that, because I did not have that field. Nam Yaren's 11 pages carry method and target, and date, and they do not carry fee status, because it did not occur to either of us that it was a variable. She watches me not have it, and nods as though something has been confirmed, and tells me that is the part everybody misses. The four shapes do not run at random across the first year, she says. They run downward through it. Students with families behind them get taken once, make the call, come back topped up, and the whole thing costs them one uncomfortable conversation. Students without families get taken once, and that is the entire supply. The people running the scripts know precisely which is which. The school requires remission students to collect a form from the same office at the same hour during the first week, and anybody standing in that corridor with a notebook has a list. I ask her whether she took the 3 names on my pages, and she says yes. She says it the way you would confirm a delivery. Then, before I can put anything into the gap, she gives me the rest of it. That is that she took them because those 3 were on the list and were going to be taken by somebody inside the first month regardless. Being taken by her cost them their balance, she says, and being taken by the arrangement on the 3rd and 4th floors cost them their balance, and then goes on costing. I ask whether she genuinely expects me to accept that as a justification. She says no, and does not flinch, and says she expects me to check it. That is the moment I understand that she is better at this than I am. Because she has handed me something true, and load-bearing, and verifiable, and it is the first complete piece of information anybody has given me since I arrived, my own feed included. She has done it knowing I will check, and that checking will take me a week. That at the end of that week I will have confirmed her account and spent 7 days building a model of this school with her framing baked into the foundations. She has not lied to me once. She has done something considerably more expensive, which is that she has made herself my source. I ask her what she wants. She says she wants me to stop lending marks at 0 interest. The warmth goes out of her voice on that sentence like a light being switched off in a room I had not realized I was standing in. When I wrote that loan for Nam Yeren, I registered it. She says, because I am careful, and a registered instrument is a public instrument. Within a day, every insolvent first year at this academy knew there is a boy in the West dormitory who will make you solvent for nothing. Then she asks me how many of them have come to me so far. 4. 4 in 9 days, and I have said yes to 2 of them, and both times I told myself I was making an investment in a person rather than establishing a habit. She says the number is going to be 40. It will be 40 because I have not set a price. A thing with no price does not get rationed by need. It gets rationed by nerve. The people at this school with the most nerve are not the people in trouble. Then she asks what happens to the 2 students I have already made solvent once I run out of marks. The 5th applicant, she says, will turn out to be somebody's cousin who was never insolvent at all. I do not have an answer for her. I have 12,000 marks minus a great deal, and a reputation I built deliberately without once asking what it would cost to service. She stands and puts her bag on her shoulder, and then she says the last thing gently. It is the only moment in the entire conversation where I believe I am hearing her actual voice. She says she did not have anybody to tell her this in her own first month, and that she would rather I heard it from her than learned it the way she did. Then she has gone through the stacks with her hair swinging, and 2 tables over a boy watches her go with an expression of uncomplicated goodwill. I sit there with my hands flat on the table. She broke 3 people's keys and schedules on purpose, in order to farm their gratitude. She has just done me a genuine kindness, and I cannot get those 2 facts to sit in separate rooms. They keep insisting on being the same person. The note comes under my door on a Tuesday. Actual paper, folded once, no envelope. It gives a name and a time and a place. The name is Y Seryong and the place is the 3rd year common room, which first years do not enter. I go obviously because the alternative is not going, and then spending the rest of the term as a person who did not. The 3rd year common room is quiet in exactly the way Baydusik described the entire 3rd year as being quiet. There are perhaps 15 students in it, and none of them look up when I come through the door. She is at a table by the window with a folder in front of her, and 2 chairs. The 2nd chair is already pulled out, which is the sort of small staging I would have done myself. She is not what I had built. I had assembled something imposing in my head, and what is actually sitting there is a girl who looks tired and faintly amused, in a uniform worn into the shape of her. She does not straighten up when I arrive. She tells me to sit down and asks whether I want tea. And when I say no, she says that is a pity, because she has been at this for 6 hours. Then she opens the folder and turns it around to face me. It is my loan, the registered instrument, printed out. 12,000 marks. Pon Ijin to Nam Yeren. 0 interest. Uncollateralized. No term. She asks what the term is. I tell her there is no term. She asks what happens if Nam Yeren never repays it, and I tell her that nothing happens, and she nods and says correct. Then she asks me what the difference is between a loan with no term, no interest, and no collateral, and a gift. I open my mouth and discover that I have nothing at all to put into it. There is no difference, she says, and she says it kindly. I have written a gift, called it a loan, and registered it, and the registration is the only part that did anything whatsoever. What it did was inform 900 people that my marks are available to anybody with a story. She says 4 have come to me so far, and she knows the number because she has been watching my paper the way she watches everybody's paper. Then she tells me without any particular emphasis that the 5th will arrive within the week and that he will be the first one who is lying. I ask her what she wants. Why Suryong closes the folder, puts her chin on her hand, and looks directly at me for the first time, and there is nothing bored anywhere in it. She says she wants to buy Nam Yeren's paper at face value, 12,000 marks. Paid to me today, it takes the position off my book, she says, and ends my career as the free bank before it costs me anything I cannot get back. Leaves me with my balance whole and one extremely good lesson. I ask what happens to Nam Yeren. She says Nam Yeren will then owe her 12,000 marks instead of owing me, at whatever terms she chooses to set. She does not soften that or dress it or pretend I will fail to understand what those terms are going to be. Then she gives me the part that is actually the offer. She has read the 11 pages, and she does not say how. In 2 years at this academy, nobody has built a loss table, she says. She has been running a credit book on instinct and relationships, and a very good memory, and instinct does not scale. She has known that for a year and has not been able to do anything about it. Then she says she would rather have the person who built that table than have the table. She slides the folder an inch toward me and says I can have either one. I can sell her the paper and walk away clean, or I can keep the paper and come and work on her book, and she will pay me properly. I will learn more in 1 term at that table than in 3 years anywhere else in this building. Then she says the thing that tells me she is genuinely dangerous. I cannot have both. If I keep Nam Yeren's paper, I will keep writing them, because I have already proved that I will, and a person running a charity cannot also be trusted with a credit book. She is not going to hand her ledger to somebody whose hand shakes. Then she sits back and waits, and does not fill the silence. And outside the window, somebody is running laps in the last of the light. The feed has not mentioned her once, not in 5 weeks, not one line, which means that in 5 weeks, Wai Suryong has not made a single decision about me, which means she has not decided yet, and every word of the last 10 minutes was spoken before deciding, and I am not sitting in the aftermath of her conclusion at all. I am sitting in the middle of the test. I tell Wai Suryong that I am not going to do either of the things she has offered. She does not react, which I expected, and she waits, which I did not. Most people fill a silence like that with the next part of their argument, and she simply sits with her chin on her hand and lets me stand in it. So I tell her the third thing. I tell her she does not want Nam Yeren's paper and she does not want me, because both of those are the same purchase made twice. What she actually wants is the thing she said out loud 6 minutes ago, which is that instinct does not scale. She wants an underwriting model, and she has spent 2 years unable to build one because she has been too busy being the person the model would replace. I tell her I will sell her one, not my labor and not my loyalty. A product, priced, delivered on a schedule, and she will not own it, and neither will I stop selling it to her. She asks what the price is. I tell her that for the first term it is not marks at all, because marks are the one thing she has in quantity, and I have almost none of. A person who takes payment in the currency the other party prints has already lost the negotiation. What I want is access to her book. Not the balances, which are on the board for everybody, but the terms. Every loan she holds, the rate, the collateral, the repayment history, with names removed if she likes. I tell her that in exchange, she gets a model that tells her which of her positions are going to fail before they fail. Wai Suryong is quiet for a long moment, and then she says that I have just asked a bank to hand a first year its entire loan book. I tell her I have asked a bank to hand a first year the only asset it owns, that it is currently not using for anything. That lands. I watch it land. Her eyes go very slightly narrow and something at the corner of her mouth moves. She says that she has been running this book for 2 years and nobody has ever once tried to sell her anything. They come to borrow, or they come to beg, or occasionally they come to threaten, and not one of them has arrived with a proposal. Then she asks me what happens if the model is wrong. I tell her the truth, which is that it will be wrong, and that being wrong is not the failure state. A model that is wrong in a known direction by a known amount is worth more than instinct that is right most of the time for reasons nobody can write down. I tell her the whole point is that when it fails, she will be able to see where it failed and fix that part. She will not lose an afternoon wondering whether she is losing her touch. She says nobody has ever spoken to her like this either. Then she closes the folder with my registered gift inside it and slides it across the table and tells me to keep it as a reminder. She says the terms are that I get the book with names removed and she gets a working model by the end of term. If it is useless, she will take Nam Yeren's paper at face value and I will not argue. I tell her that is acceptable. We do not shake hands because she does not offer and because I have already worked out that she does not touch people. Walking back across the quad in the dark, I let myself have about 4 seconds of feeling clever and then I put it away. She agreed too fast. Whatever I just bought, she had already decided to sell before I opened my mouth. and the only question is which of us thinks the price was low. The fifth applicant arrives on the Thursday, exactly as advertised. He is a first year I have not met, and he leads with the story rather than the ask, which is the first thing wrong. Everybody who has genuinely been taken leads with the ask, because they are embarrassed about the story. He tells me he has been cleaned out by a second year running the tax, that it happened over 3 weeks in small amounts, and that he did not notice until the balance was gone. It is a good account, it is well constructed, and it matches the third shape closely, and he has the emotional register almost exactly right, a sort of tired flatness with the shame sanded off it. Almost exactly. That is the problem. Because Nam Yaren's 11 pages contain 9 of these, and I have read them more times than I can count, and every single person taken by the tax says the same specific thing. They all say the amount. Not the total, the individual amount, the one that was asked for each time, and they say it with a precision that has nothing to do with arithmetic. 200 marks, 80 marks, 150. They remember it the way you remember the exact wording of something somebody said to you in a hospital corridor, because the small amount is the part that humiliates them. Being robbed of everything is a story you can tell. Handing over 80 marks 11 times because you did not want to be difficult is not. He gives me the total and never once gives me the increment. I ask him for it directly and he pauses for a quarter of a second and then produces a number that is round. So I ask him a second question, which is who else on his floor was paying. He tells me he does not know, and there it is, because the tax is not run on individuals. The tax is run on floors, and its whole mechanism is that everybody can see everybody else paying, and the visibility is what makes refusing feel like defection. A person taken by the tax knows the names of 4 other people who were taken by the tax. It is the only one of the 4 shapes that cannot be run in private. I tell him I am not going to lend him anything, and I tell him why, and I do it in a flat voice with no edge on it at all. His face does something complicated, then he says with a certain amount of dignity that it was worth trying, and he leaves. I sit down afterward and find my hands are not quite steady, and it takes me a minute to work out that it is not nerves. It is the specific physical aftermath of having been right about something that would have cost me 12,000 marks to be wrong about. 4 days, she said. She said the 5th would be lying, and she said it 4 days before he was. Which means why Suryong is running a model already. It is in her head and she cannot write it down, and that is exactly what she told me, and I still managed to hear it as a weakness rather than as a demonstration. So I set a price, because Gu So Young was right and a thing with no price gets rationed by nerve. The price is not marks. Anybody who comes to me insolvent has no marks by definition, so charging interest to a person at 0 is a way of pretending to run a business while actually running a slower charity. What I take instead is the account. Full method, in detail, written and signed, including the parts that make them look stupid, and specifically including the name of the person who took them. That last part is the whole cost, because in this school the name is the only thing anybody is genuinely afraid to hand over. Nam Yeren sets it up. She takes them one at a time in the study room on the 2nd floor of the library. She goes first every time with her own account, and by the end of the 2nd week we have 22 of them. Not 9, 22. Because it turns out that a great many students who were never going to admit they had been taken will admit it if somebody offers to make them solvent for the price of a signature. The model comes together in the 3rd week, and it is not complicated. Frequency of loss by shape, by floor, by fee status, by whether the target had an older sibling in the school, cross-referenced against the terms on Wai Suryong's book. What falls out of it is one number that I look at for a long time before I show anybody. A first year who has been taken once is 9 times more likely to be taken again inside the same term than a first year who has never been taken at all. 9 times. Not because they are gullible, because I checked that and the correlation with anything you would call gullibility is close to nothing. They are 9 times more likely because being taken puts you on a list. There is a list. Somebody is maintaining it, and it is being sold or shared or passed downward, and a name that goes onto it gets worked repeatedly by different people running different shapes until there is nothing left. The 4 shapes are not 4 independent predators. They are 4 tools being used against a shared target set. I show Nam Yeren because she assembled the data and because I want to know whether she sees it before I say it. She reads the sheet twice, and then she says very quietly that when the girl took her balance on the first day, the girl already knew her name. Then she says the other thing, and the other thing is worse. She says that the girl knew her name, and the girl was a first year, on her first day, at a school she had also just arrived at. So the list predates the intake. Ryu Gantai makes his example in the 4th week, and he does it well. He does it to somebody I have never spoken to, which is the part that tells me it was aimed at me. The boy is a first year on the 3rd floor, a non-member and by all accounts an entirely unremarkable person. He gets taken over 2 days by 3 different people running, 3 different shapes in sequence, and the sequencing is the signature. The coin, then the tax, then the favor, arriving one after another with no gap. on a boy whose name had never appeared on any list Nam Yeren had built. He is at 0 by Friday and property by the weekend. The third floor joins the arrangement almost entirely within a week. I sit with that for a long time, because it is the cleanest piece of work I have seen since I got here. He did not threaten anybody, and he did not touch anybody. There is not one thing in it that the Academy would call a violation, because every single transfer was properly registered and freely entered into. He simply demonstrated the peril, and the demonstration was aimed at a boy chosen specifically for being unremarkable, because the message is not that dangerous people get taken. The message is that it does not matter who you are. Seller controls the peril. I wrote that question down in the corridor on the 9th day, and now I have the answer, and the answer is worth nothing to me at all. That is the part I did not expect. I have proof of the central fact of this school's economy, and there is nothing whatsoever I can do with it. I cannot take it to the Academy, because the Academy wrote the rules that make it legal. I cannot take it to the first year, because they will hear that the arrangement is powerful, which is the advertisement, not the indictment. I cannot take it to Ryugante, because he knows information is only worth what somebody will pay for it, and there is no buyer for this. It is the most valuable thing I own, and its market price is 0. The feed names Cheon Baekyu on a Tuesday in the 5th week, and I sit up so fast that I bang my elbow on the desk. Cheon Baekyu has decided to find out what you are. Not who. I read it 4 times to be sure, because the feed has never once used that construction about anybody, and it has been scrupulously consistent for 5 weeks about everything else. Guso Yang decided to sit next to me, Baedusik decided to ask me for money, and Ryugante decided I was worth a look. Every line before this one has been a person deciding to do a thing to me or about me, and this one is a person deciding to determine my nature. Which would be a strange way to phrase a decision to look into somebody's background. It is a perfectly normal way to phrase a decision about something whose category is in question. I go down to the main hall and stand in front of the board for a while without really seeing it. Then I go and find Baedusik and ask him what people say about the Cheon family, and he tells me at length and with enormous enthusiasm, and almost none of it is useful. The family is old money. There are Cheons on the board of 2 banks, and a Cheon endowed the East Wing. That last one he says is a joke, as the kind of thing everybody knows and nobody thinks about, and I make him say it twice. A Cheon endowed the East Wing. I ask him who else has a building. He says nobody, and then he stops, because he is not stupid, he is permeable, and something has just gone in and this time it did not come straight back out. Then he says that actually the whole east side is the newer construction and it went up about 15 years ago. The academy did not exist in its current form before that, and everybody knows the school is not as old as it looks. 15 years. I ask him where he heard that, and he says, everybody knows it. That is the answer that has been in front of me since the assembly hall. 900 students in a room built for 1800. Not a school that shrank, and not a school pretending to a history it does not have. A school built at twice the size it needed, by somebody who expected it to fill, and who has been waiting 15 years for a second intake that has not arrived. That night I write it in the notebook under the 5th week, and I write it as a question rather than a conclusion, because I have learned that much. Who builds a school for 1800 students, fills half of it, hands every child a balance, and then waits 15 years? Guso Yang finds me in the dining hall at an hour when nobody is in the dining hall, which is how I know she came to find me rather than happening across me. She sits down opposite with a cup of something she does not drink and asks whether I checked. I tell her I did, and that everything she told me was accurate, and that it took 8 days. She says it took her most of a term when she was doing it alone. Then she asks what I found that she did not tell me, because she assumes there is something. She is right, and the fact that she assumed it is the reason I decide to give it to her. I tell her about the list. 22 accounts, 9 times the reoccurrence rate, and the name of the girl who took Nam Yeren on the first day already in that girl's mouth before either of them had unpacked. Guso Yang listens without moving. When I finish, she puts both hands around the cup she is not drinking from. Says that she has known there was a list for a year and has never been able to prove it. Then she says the thing that makes the whole conversation worth having. She says she knows because she was offered one. Not given. Offered. In the 2nd month of her first year, after she had taken her 2nd target, a 2nd year approached her and told her she was working inefficiently, that there was a better way to select. The price was a percentage, and the percentage was not large. She turned it down, and she is not entirely sure why, and she has thought about it since, and decided it was because the person offering was too relaxed about it. I ask her what she means by too relaxed. She says that everybody at this school who has something is nervous about it, all the time, because at this school having something means somebody is working out how to take it, and this person was not nervous at all. He talked about the list the way you would talk about the timetable. We sit with that. Then she asks what I want, and I tell her I want to follow the marks, not the names, not the shapes, the marks themselves. 22 students in the first year alone have lost meaningful balance in 5 weeks, and every one of those transfers is registered, and registration is public. I have been treating that as an inconvenience rather than as the entire opportunity. Every mark that moves in this school leaves a record. I have been building a model of how people get robbed when I could have been building a map of where the money goes. She looks at me for a second and then says, in a slightly different voice, that she has been here a year and a half and never once thought of that. It takes 11 days and most of it is Nam Yeren's work. The registry is public in the way that things are public when nobody expects anybody to read them. There is a terminal in the administrative building that will show you any registered instrument if you have the reference. It will not let you search, and it will not let you list, and it will show you exactly one at a time. Which is fine because we have 22 references from the accounts, and each instrument names a counterparty, and each counterparty can be searched for their own instruments, if you already know a reference. It is a chain you can only walk one link at a time, and only if you already have the first link, and there are 4 of us walking it. Beyduzik turns out to be extraordinary at this. I did not expect that. He sits at that terminal for 6 hours at a stretch reading transfer records with a pencil and a notebook. He does not get bored, and when I ask him about it, he says it is like watching people's mail. He is not being funny. That is genuinely what it is to him, and it makes him better at it than any of us, because he keeps noticing things that are not numbers. He notices that 4 different transfers on 4 different days were registered within the same 90 seconds of the hour. He notices that one girl's name is spelled 2 different ways across 2 instruments and that both were accepted. And on the 9th day, he notices the thing that matters, which is that the marks do not stay. Every one of the 22, the taker holds the balance for somewhere between 2 days and 2 weeks, and then it moves again. And it moves in a lump, and it does not move to the same place each time. It goes to 7 different second years across the sample. Those 7 are not connected to each other in any way we can see, and none of them are the people running the shapes. All 7 of them are ordinary students with unremarkable balances who have never appeared in any account anybody has given us. I look at the 7 names on the sheet, and something at the back of my skull goes cold, because I have seen this exact structure before. I saw it every few months for 7 years, in claims, and it has a name in that world. When money moves out of a source in irregular amounts through a rotating set of unremarkable intermediaries who have no relationship to each other, that is not a group of people getting rich. That is one person trying not to be a pattern. We follow the 7. It takes another 4 days, and all 7 converge, and they converge on a single second year named Sung Ha-bin. Then Nam Yeren looks up the balance and says my name in a way she has not said it before. Sung Ha-bin is at 0. Sung Ha-bin has been at 0 for 11 months. There is a registered instrument to prove it. And by the rules of this academy, Sung Ha-bin has not owned a decision since the middle of last year. Every mark stripped out of the first year is flowing, through 7 intermediaries, into a boy who does not legally have the capacity to accept it. We sit in the study room, and none of us says anything for a while. Then Beyduzik, who does not know what he is looking at and therefore says the true thing first, asks why anybody would put money into a person who cannot spend it. Nobody puts money into a person who cannot spend it. They put money into a person who cannot refuse it, and who cannot be asked about it, and whose entire balance sheet is already the property of somebody else. Sung Ha-bin is not the destination, he is the account. Whoever holds his paper holds everything that lands in him, without any of it ever appearing under their own name on any board in this building. Nam Yeren asks the obvious question, which is who holds his paper, and I tell her that will be a registered instrument like everything else. That we have the reference, and that we can look it up in about 4 minutes. It takes us 2 days to work up to looking, and I am not proud of that. The instrument is 11 months old. The creditor is not Ryugante, and it is not any name off the 7, and it is not anybody we have ever built a page about. The creditor is a 3rd year, and the 3rd year is Wai Suryong. I put the model in front of her on a Thursday, complete, on paper, the way I said I would. She reads it properly, which takes 40 minutes, and she does not say anything at all while she does it. It is good work. Frequency by shape and by floor, and by fee status. The 9 times reoccurrence finding, the reasoning behind it. A scoring method that will let her rank any borrower on this book against a predicted failure probability in about 90 seconds. There is one section at the back that I have written and rewritten 4 times, which sets out the recommendation that she stop lending against balance and start lending against the reoccurrence score, because balance tells her what a student has, and the score tells her what they are going to have. When she finishes, she sits back and says it is better than she expected. Then she asks what I want, and I tell her I want to ask her one question and have a true answer. That after that I will keep delivering the model regardless of what the answer cost me. She says to ask it. I ask her why she holds Sung Ha-bin's paper, why Seryong does not move for a moment. Then she does something I have not seen her do, which is that she looks away, out of the window, at the quad in the flat gray afternoon light. She stays looking at it while she talks. She tells me she bought it 11 months ago from a second year who was leaving the school mid-year, which happens, in which the academy does not explain. She bought it because it was cheap and because she was building volume. Then, about a month afterward, marks started arriving in it. Not from her, and not from anybody she knew, and in amounts she had not lent and could not account for. She went to the registry and did exactly what I have spent 3 weeks doing and got exactly as far as I got, which is 7 intermediaries and no further. Then she stops and turns back from the window and says the part I did not see coming. She says she has not touched a single mark of it. 11 months of it, accumulating in an account she legally controls. She has not moved any of it and has not spent any of it and cannot close the position because closing it requires the debtor to become solvent. The debtor becoming solvent requires somebody to put 12,000 marks into a boy that everybody involved appears to want exactly where he is. I ask her what her balance would be without it. She says a little over 90,000 marks. 406,000 on the board at the top of the main hall, in the one honest object in this building. 316,000 of it is somebody else's money sitting in her name where every student in the school can see it. She has not been the bank. She has been the sign, and whoever put it there has had 11 months to watch what she did about it, and what she did about it was nothing. The nothing has been visible from the floor of the main hall the entire time. I ask her, finally, why she is telling me. She says because I asked, and because in 11 months I am the first person who has. Because she has spent that entire time being extremely careful in a way that has started to look, from the outside, exactly like being extremely rich. The question I cannot get past is why anybody would put 300,000 marks somewhere that everybody can see. I take it apart for 4 days and get nowhere because I keep asking it as a question about hiding. Hiding is what the 7 intermediaries are for. And the 7 intermediaries work. The chain does genuinely break at Sunghabin for anybody who is not prepared to sit at a terminal for 11 days with a pencil. If the object were concealment, then the chain should end somewhere invisible. Instead, it ends in the single most visible number in this building, on a board that updates at midnight and that 8 or 10 students stand in front of at any hour of the day. Somebody went to considerable trouble to launder a great deal of standing, and then part the result under a floodlight, which means concealment was never the object, and I have been reading the structure upside down for 4 days. It comes apart at breakfast of all places, with Beidusik talking at me about something else entirely. He is explaining why the second years never bothered the first years on our floor. He says it is because everybody knows the arrangement handles our floor, and I ask him how everybody knows that. He says you just know. I ask him whether he has ever seen it handle anything, and he thinks about it and says no. Then he says that you do not need to, because you can see who is a member. You can see. That is the whole product. Ryu Gante's entire arrangement is a visibility instrument, and I worked that out in a corridor in week 2, and then somehow failed to apply it to anything else. The board is not where the money is hidden. The board is where the money is displayed, and it is displayed on the one object in this academy that nobody doubts. It is displayed under the name of a third year who is careful and who does not spend and who therefore never generates a single event that would cause anybody to look closer. Every student in the school orients themselves against that number. It is why the third year is quiet. It is why anybody who accumulates enough to matter ends up sitting across the table from her. The number at the top of the main hall is not a record of who won. It is an instruction about who to be afraid of, and it has been running unattended for 11 months. And while 900 students look at it, nobody looks anywhere else at all. I tell Wai Suryong on the Sunday in the third year common room, and I am careful about how I put it because there is no version of this that is not insulting. I tell her she is not the apex of anything. I tell her that somebody built a very good decoy and needed a name to put on it. Chose hers because she is careful and quiet and does not spend, and because a decoy that does anything interesting stops working. Then I tell her the part that actually matters, which is that she has been left in place for 11 months, and that 11 months is not an oversight. She takes it better than I would have. She is quiet for a while, and then she says that it explains something she has never been able to explain, which is that she has never once been challenged. 2 years, top of the board, and not one seizure attempt, not one serious move against her. Not even the sort of opportunistic nonsense that any student in the top 10 receives constantly. She had put it down to reputation. She says that with a very flat mouth. Then she asks what happens if we close the position. 12,000 marks makes Song Habin solvent. Solvency ends the creditor relationship, which unwinds her control of the account, which means 316,000 marks stops being visible under her name at the top of the main hall. It would come off the board overnight. Whoever built the structure would have to either rebuild it somewhere else or do without it, and either way they would have to move, and a thing that moves can be watched. She asks how I would find 12,000 marks. I tell her I have no idea, and that this is why I brought it to a bank. Cheon Baekyu is waiting outside the library on the Tuesday, and he is not pretending to be doing anything else. which is somehow the most aggressive thing about it. He falls in beside me and says that I have been at the registry terminal for 3 weeks. Not a question. I tell him that is true. He asks whether I found what I was looking for, and I tell him that I found what was there. He says those are usually different, and for the first time he sounds like he is enjoying himself. Then he says the thing he came to say, which is that when we stood in front of the board in the first week he told me the sum was wrong. That he has been curious ever since about how long it would take me. I ask him how long it took him. He says he never had to do the sum, and he says it without any particular pride. And that is when the rest of it arrives. He does not need the board because he is not on that side of it. I have spent 6 weeks building a model of how standing moves between students at this school, and the entire model assumes the students are the participants. A boy whose family endowed the East Wing is not a participant. He is downstream of whoever built the thing, or upstream of it, or beside it, and any of those is a different animal from everybody else I have met here. I ask him, directly, what the academy is for. Xian Baekyu stops and looks at me with what I would describe as mild interest. He says that is a better question than the one everybody else asks, which is what the ledger is for, and that the difference between those two questions is about 15 years. Then he tells me that a school that has a ledger and a ledger that has a school are different structures, that I should work out which one I am standing in before I try to close anybody's position. He knows. He knows about Xiang Habin and he knows what we are considering, and he has been at this conversation for 2 minutes. I ask him how he knows, and he says the registry logs every reference that gets looked up, and that this is on page 38, and that almost nobody reads to page 38. Then he says something I do not expect. He says that he is not going to stop me, and that he could, and that he wants me to understand he could, that he is going to let it happen anyway because he has been at this school for 6 weeks watching somebody do arithmetic that nobody here has done in 15 years. He would like to see what the arithmetic does when it hits something. He walks off before I can decide whether that was help. Page 38 says exactly what he said it says. There is a logged record of registry access retained, available to administrative staff on request, 6 weeks of my searches, and Nam Yiren's and Beiduzik's 6-hour sessions, all of it recorded and sitting somewhere. I never once read to the back of the document I have been carrying around since the 3rd day telling everybody else that they should read it. I sit on the floor of my room with the packet open at page 38, and I feel the specific heat of having been the mark. Not of anybody in particular. That is almost worse. I have spent 6 weeks congratulating myself for reading the fine print, and the fine print I read was the fine print about other people. The clause about me was 11 pages further on where I never looked, because by then I had decided I understood the document. That is not a mistake a first year makes. That is a mistake a professional makes. And I made it because I had been treating this place as a problem, rather than as a room I am standing in. We do it anyway in the end, and we do it on a Thursday. Why Seryong puts up 8,000 marks and I put up the last of mine and Gu So Young, who I did not ask, puts up the difference, does not explain why, and does not stay to be thanked. The instrument is registered at 4 in the afternoon. 12,000 marks into the account of a second year named Shang Habin who has not owned a decision since the middle of last year, restoring him to solvency, extinguishing the creditor relationship, unwinding 316,000 marks if somebody else is standing from the top of the main hall. The board updates at midnight. I do not go and watch it, because half the school will be there, and I have finally learned something. Nam Yeren goes and comes back at 10 past and tells me the top of the 3rd year panel now reads Y Seryong, 91,000 marks, that the number under it has not changed at all, and that 11 separate people were standing in front of it working out what had happened to the school. I sleep badly and I am awake before 7. The feed comes at 8, and the first line is not about Ryu Gante, and it is not about Xian Baekyu. It is not about whoever spent 11 months building a floodlight out of a girl who does not spend. It says that Song Habin has decided to speak to me. I read it standing up, in the middle of my room, with my heart going, because there is only one way a line about Song Habin appears in the feed. The feed reports on people who have made a decision about me. For 11 months, Song Habin has not been a person who could make one, and as of 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon he is. He has had 16 hours of owning himself, and the first thing he has decided to do with them is come and find me. Song Habin is waiting outside my door at 6:30 in the morning, and he has clearly been there for some time. He is taller than I expected and thinner than is good for him, and the first thing I notice is that he stands the way Nam Yeren stands, with nothing moving anywhere. The second thing I notice is that he does not look at my face. He asks whether I am the one who did it, and when I say yes, he asks why, and there is nothing in the question except the question. I tell him the truth, which is that we did it to unwind a structure, and that he was the mechanism rather than the object. That if he was hoping for a better reason, I do not have one. He takes that in and nods slowly, and says that he would not have believed a better one. Then he asks whether he can come in, and we sit on the floor of my room because there is one chair and he does not take it. He tells me what 11 months of not owning a decision is like. It is not what I assumed. I had built something dramatic and what he describes as mostly administrative. Nobody made him do very much. He was told where to sit for the first 2 months, and after that nobody bothered, because the point of holding his paper was never to direct him. The point was that he could not enter into any instrument of his own, could not lend or borrow or wager or accept a transfer in his own right. Every mark that arrived in his account belonged to whoever held the paper. He says the strange part is not the control. The strange part is that after about the 4th month he stopped being asked to do anything at all and simply continued existing at this school as a piece of infrastructure that walks to class. I ask him who bought him, and he tells me that he sold himself, and that this is the part he has been coming to say. He tells it slowly and in order. He arrived at Cheonggram 2 years ago on full fee remission, with no family behind him. He was taken again inside the 2nd month by the 2nd shape, and he was taken again inside the 2nd month by the 4th. By the end of his first term, he was at 400 marks out of 12,000, and he had understood something that he says most people here never understand. That is that the bottom of this school is not a place you climb out of. It is a floor with a slope on it. Everybody he knew who had been taken again. The reoccurrence I found in the data was not a discovery to him at all, because it was simply the weather. So when a man he did not know stopped him in the corridor and offered to buy his remaining balance for a sum that would clear his family's situation at home, he took it. I ask him to say that again, and he does, and the phrasing does not change. A man, not a student. He says the man was somewhere in his 40s, wore a staff lanyard, and did not give a name, and that the conversation lasted about 4 minutes, and was entirely pleasant. The terms were that Seong Ha-bin would transfer his balance and enter insolvency voluntarily, that a sum of actual money would go to an account outside the school, that nothing further would ever be asked of him. He says the sum arrived, and that it was real, and that he checked, and that his mother's situation was in fact resolved. Then he says that the man was correct about the last part as well, because in 11 months nothing further was ever asked of him. I sit on the floor of my room with my back against the bed, and my hands very still. I think about the fact that I have spent 7 weeks building a model of the student economy. I ask him whether he ever saw the man again. He says once, in the administrative building, at a distance. That the man was going into an office rather than coming out of one, which I make him repeat, because a man going in is a visitor and a man coming out is staff. He says he does not know which office. He says he has thought about it for 11 months and has never been able to decide whether he was cheated, because everything he was promised was delivered exactly as described. The only thing he lost was a capacity he had already been stripped of twice, by people who promised him nothing at all. Then he asks me the question he came here to ask, which is whether I am going to want something from him now. And that is when I understand what the last 11 months have actually done to him, because he is not asking it with fear or with resentment. He is asking it the way you ask a new landlord about the terms. He has been property for a year, and he has arrived at the reasonable working assumption that whoever restored him did it in order to have him. He has come at 6:30 in the morning to find out what the arrangement is, so that he can begin complying with it. I tell him no. I tell him that he owes 12,000 marks to 3 people, and that we will work out repayment when he has any capacity to repay. That nothing else attaches, and that he can walk out of this room and never speak to me again, and the position will stand. He looks at me for the first time when I say it. Then he says, without any particular emotion, that he does not believe me, and that he will come back next week and ask again, and that he means no offense by it. I tell him that is a sensible policy, and that he should keep it. He gets up and leaves, and I sit on the floor for a long time afterward. A man in his 40s with a staff lanyard and no name, buying a child's capacity to hold property, with real money from outside the walls. Every single thing I have built since I arrived assumes the participants are students. I take it to Gu So Yang first, which surprises me while I am doing it. She listens all the way through without interrupting. In the dining hall at the hour when nobody is there. At the end she puts her hands around the cup she does not drink from and says that she believes it. Then she tells me something she has not told me before, which is that the remission students are called in for a review in the 2nd term of 1st year, individually, one at a time, in an office in the administrative building, with a member of staff whose role is not explained. She had hers in March. She says it was pleasant and mostly about her family's circumstances and her plans. That at the end of it the man asked her in a friendly way how she had been finding the ledger. I ask her what she said. She says she told him it was manageable, and he asked whether she had needed to borrow and she said no, and he wrote something down. She says she assumed it was pastoral care. She says she assumed that for a year and a half, and has just now, sitting at this table, stopped assuming it. Then she works it out ahead of me, which I am beginning to expect. She says that if somebody wanted to know which children can be bought, the cheapest way to find out is not surveillance. It is to hand 900 of them a balance, remove every protection, then write down what each one does, because a year of that will sort them more accurately than any interview ever could. The 4 shapes are not a parasite on this school. They are the instrument. Somebody built a room with no floor in it and has been watching for 15 years to see who falls and who climbs and who starts selling tickets. I say that we do not know that, and she agrees that we do not know that, and neither of us believes we are wrong. That I do the stupidest thing I have done since I arrived, and the worst part is that I do it slowly, over 9 days, with time to reconsider at every stage. I decide to break Ryu Gantai's arrangement. The logic is sound, and I can still lay it out and hear how sound it is. The arrangement is a visibility instrument whose product is the appearance of protection, and it protects against a peril it manufactures itself. All of that is now demonstrable, because I have the 22 accounts and I have the sequencing on the third floor boy and I have the timing data Baydusik pulled off the registry. If members understood that the thing they pay every month exists to sell them safety from itself, membership collapses and the arrangement is nothing but membership. It has no other asset. So I write it up, properly the way I would have written it for a client. 11 pages with the evidence attached and the sequencing laid out in a table that a 16-year-old could follow. And then, I want it seen by everybody at once, and I have decided that being right is not enough this time. So I put it on the notice board outside the dining hall on a Monday morning, with 200 copies stacked underneath. It works exactly as designed for about 6 hours. People read it and people take copies. By the middle of the afternoon, there are clusters of first years going through it line by line, and 3 separate people come and find me to say that the third floor boy was their friend. One girl cries in a corridor. The evidence holds up under all of it because the evidence is good. By dinner, everybody in the first year understands that the arrangement manufactures the danger it charges for, and that Ryu Gantai has been running a protection racket in the most literal available sense. And then, over the following 4 days, membership goes up. I watch it happen and I cannot make it stop. It goes up on the 3rd floor and then on the 4th. Then on floors that were never being worked at all. By the end of the week, Baydusik tells me that people are asking him how to join because he is known to be close to me and therefore assumed to know. I ask him what they say when he asks them why. He tells me they say that if the arrangement is powerful enough to do all that, then it is powerful enough to be worth being inside. There it is. That is the whole of it, and it took me 9 days of careful work to hand it to them. I proved that Ryu Gantai is dangerous. I documented it in 11 pages with tables. Every student in this school already suspected that being outside the arrangement was unsafe, and what they wanted was not a demonstration that they were wrong. What they wanted was a reason to stop pretending they had a choice. And I printed 200 copies of it and stacked them outside the dining hall. Guso Yang finds me on the Friday and does not say anything cruel, which is worse. She just asks who I thought the audience was. I tell her I thought it was the members. She says that the members have known for a year, and that the audience I actually reached was everybody who had not yet decided. That I have spent 9 days doing Ryu Gantai's recruitment for him, with better production values than he could afford. Then she says the sentence I will be carrying for a while, which is that I keep confusing the thing that is true with the thing that is useful. That the gap between those two is where everybody at this school lives. Do not perform. I wrote it in the notebook in week 2, in my own handwriting, after Ryu Gantai stopped walking in a corridor. They come for Baydusik on the following Wednesday, and they do it properly, and it is over before I hear about it. He is not taken by a shape. That is the part I keep returning to. He is taken by a registered wager on a sanctioned contest, entered into freely. The terms read out and agreed in front of 2 witnesses, in the boxing club, against a second year who is a genuinely good boxer. Baydusik is not a boxer. He is a cheerful, permeable boy who has been told by people who spent a week being very friendly to him that the club is fun. The first bout is a formality, they said, and everybody does it. He wagers his entire balance, 11,000 in sum, everything he has including the fees I have been paying him for 4 months, because somebody told him it was a formality. The bout lasts under a minute and he concedes, and the concession is legitimate, and the transfer is legitimate. There is not one thing in the entire sequence that the Academy would look at twice. Baydusik is at 0 by 4 in the afternoon. Ryu Gantai's arrangement holds his paper by 6. I hear at 7 from Nam Yeren, who has been crying and has stopped, and I sit down on the edge of my bed and understand, with total clarity, that this was not done to Baydusik. Baydusik was not the point of it. He was the most visible thing I owned, the mouth I hired in the first week, the boy who told an entire dining hall on the second morning that I paid for information. Taking him cost the arrangement nothing, and it is not even retaliation, because retaliation implies anger, and there was no anger anywhere in this. It is a demonstration, aimed at one person, executed on somebody who was chosen precisely because he was easy, and because everybody would see it. 9 days ago, I put 200 copies of a document outside the dining hall to show the first year what Ryu Gantai was. He has answered by showing them what I am, which is a person whose people can be taken off him in an afternoon. I go to Ryu Gantai first, because there is a version of this that ends in 20 minutes, and I owe Baydusik the attempt. He receives me in the common room on the 4th floor, with 2 of his people at the far end pretending to play cards. and he is pleasant throughout, and that is the worst part. I offer to buy the paper at face value. He says no. I offer above face value, considerably above, using marks I do not currently have and would have to find, and he says no again without any change in his expression. Then I ask him what the price is, and he tells me there is not one. He tells me why with what I am fairly sure is genuine goodwill, because he wants me to understand the lesson properly, and a lesson half learned is wasted on both of us. He says that a boy at 0 is worth nothing. Bae-dusik has no balance and no capacity and no skills the arrangement needs. And as an asset, he is worth precisely the 11,000 marks that came off him in the boxing club. That is already collected and already spent. What Ryu Gante is holding is not an asset at all. It is a position. The position has value only as long as it is not sold. Because the entire product is the fact that everybody in this school can see that I could not get my own person back. Then he says the thing that ends the conversation. He tells me that if he sold Bae-dusik to me at any price, the transaction itself would repair me, because it would prove that people taken from me can be recovered for money. He says he would rather hold a worthless boy forever than sell me the only thing I actually want, which is the demonstration that this is survivable. I walk back across the quad and it is raining slightly, and I am not angry, which frightens me a little. I am doing arithmetic. Because he is right about all of it except one thing, and the one thing is that he has described the position as though he owns it. An arrangement is not a person. It cannot hold paper, it cannot be a counterparty, and it cannot appear on an instrument, because the registry requires a named individual on both sides of every transfer at this academy. Somewhere there is a document with Bae-dusik on one side of it and a human being with a name on the other. Whatever else Ryu Gante has, he does not have a way to make that document not exist. The reference takes Nam Yeren 4 hours to find, and none of us are prepared for what is on the other end of it. The paper is not registered to anybody on the 4th floor. It is registered to a second year named Han Sun-woo. Han Sun-woo is the 4th name on the list of 7 intermediaries that Bae-dusik pulled off the registry 6 weeks ago while telling me it was like reading people's mail. Nam Yeren says it out loud before I can, which is that these are not 2 structures. I make her check it 3 times, and she checks it 3 times. The 4th intermediary in the laundering chain fed 316,000 marks into a boy who could not refuse it. That same person took possession of Bae-dusik at 6 o'clock on Wednesday evening. Ryu Gante's arrangement is not a protection racket operating alongside the shapes. It is the collection arm. The shapes strip the first year, and the arrangement takes the ones who resist and the ones who need to be made examples of. Everything flows through the same 7 names into the same account, and the account was hidden under the brightest number in the building for 11 months. I sit with that for most of a night, and what comes out of it is not triumph. It is the recognition that I have been fighting a department. Why Sir Yong reads the whole thing in the 3rd year common room on the Saturday, and does not interrupt once. When I finish, she asks what I want, and I tell her, and it is the least dignified sentence I have said out loud since I got here. I want to borrow 12,000 marks that I have no means of repaying, in order to buy back a boy from a man who has already refused to sell him at any price. I have not worked out the route yet. She asks me why she would do that. I tell her that I do not have a good answer, and that the honest one is that I spent everything I had unwinding a structure that was sitting on top of her. That this is the first time I have been in a position to ask her for something, and I would rather ask badly than not ask. She is quiet for a moment. Then she tells me that in 2 years the only people who have come to that table have come to borrow, or to beg, or occasionally to threaten. That I arrived in week 5 with a proposal, and she has been waiting ever since to find out what I would do when I had nothing to sell. She says that this is the actual test and that it has taken 4 months to arrive. Then she says yes. The terms are not kind, and I would have thought less of her if they were. 12,000 marks at a rate that is real, secured against every future term of the model, which becomes hers exclusively rather than mine to sell, and secured additionally against my own paper. If I default, she holds me the way she held Song Haben, and she says that part slowly and makes me repeat it back to her. I say it back to her. She signs, and I sign, and the instrument registers at 3:10 in the afternoon. 4 months ago in this room, she told me she would not hand her ledger to somebody whose hand shakes. This afternoon, she has lent 12,000 marks against a first-year signature for the express purpose of a rescue that has no commercial logic to it whatsoever. Neither of us mentions that. We are both, I think, aware of it. The route turns out to be page 31. Shion Baekyu is the reason I find it. He told me in week 6 to read to the back of the document, and I did not do it until a boy I hired had been taken off me. Page 31 describes the redemption of an insolvency by a third party. It is 4 sentences long, and it is not written to be found. A third party may extinguish an insolvency by settling the debtor's obligation in full to the creditor of record, and the creditor of record may not refuse a full settlement. That is the whole mechanism. The creditor's consent is not required, because the drafters were thinking about debts rather than about people, and a debt that is repaid in full is simply repaid. Ryu Gantai can refuse to sell me Beidou-6 paper for any price he likes. He cannot refuse to be paid what he is owed. And the obligation of record is not 11,000 marks. It is the sum on the instrument. The instrument was written by the fourth intermediary in a laundering chain who was moving standing through a shell account and had every reason to keep the recorded figure small and unremarkable. Nam Yeren reads it out to me twice. The registered obligation on Beidouzik is 400 marks. I settle it on the Monday morning, in person, at the administrative window, with a clerk who processes it in under 2 minutes, and does not look up. Beidouzik is solvent by 9:30, and I go and find him, and he is sitting on the low wall outside the east wing where he has apparently been sitting since 7. He looks up and does the grin, and the grin arrives about half a second later than it used to. I tell him the position is closed and that he owes 400 marks to me and nothing to anybody else, and that his capacity is restored as of this morning. He says thanks, and then he says in a completely ordinary voice that they were nice to him. He tells me that nobody was cruel and nobody made him do anything, that a boy he did not know came and sat with him at lunch on Thursday and Friday so that he would not be eating alone, that on Saturday somebody explained to him kindly that this had happened because of who he worked for. Then he says that he told them it was not my fault and that he defended me and that they agreed with him and said of course, and were very pleasant about it. He tells me this is good news. He is reporting that his captors were considerate, and I stand there on the grass in front of the east wing that a Chion endowed. I understand exactly what has been done, because it is the fourth shape, run on a boy for 5 days, by professionals. Something bad happens to you and then somebody warm is present throughout it, and the warmth is the product. In 5 days they have installed in Beidouzik a quiet permanent association between the worst thing that has happened to him and the person who hired him. They did it without one unkind word, and he will carry it for the rest of his time at this school without ever being able to say why. I tell him I am sorry. He says there is nothing to be sorry about, and he means it, and that is the injury. Nam Yeren is waiting for me at the study room with the 7 names written out and the 4th one circled. She has the look of somebody who has been holding a thing for several hours. She tells me that she went back through her own instrument from the first day. It is the transfer she made to the girl from her middle school, after she was told about an audit that does not exist. She has never looked at where those marks went afterward, because for 4 months it has been the one file she has not been able to make herself open. They went to the 4th intermediary. They went to Han Sun-woo. Inside 9 days, along with everything else. She says it steadily, and then she stops being steady, briefly, and then she is steady again. And she says that she would like to keep working on this, that she is not asking for permission, and that she would prefer I did not tell her it is too personal for her to be objective about. I tell her that I was not going to say that, and that objectivity is what the model is for, that she is the only person in this building who has read every account we hold twice. Then she asks me what we do now, and I tell her the truth, which is that we now stop trying to break anything. 9 days of careful work put 200 copies of the truth outside the dining hall and recruited for the man I was exposing. 4 months of building a model I have now signed away exclusively to a bank. 1 boy taken and returned with the association already installed. Everything I have done at this school that was aimed at an outcome has produced the opposite of that outcome. Everything that has actually worked has worked because I sat still and read something nobody else had read to the end. So we go to page 38, and we find out who has been reading our searches. Page 38 says that a student may request the access record pertaining to their own registry activity. The form for it is called a subject record request, and there's a paper version of it in a rack on the ground floor of the administrative building. Nobody in the queue ahead of me is filing one. Nobody in the queue ahead of me is filing anything, because the queue is 4 people long and 3 of them are collecting timetables. I fill it in at the counter with a pen on a chain and hand it across, and the clerk reads it, and then reads it again, and then goes and gets somebody. That takes 11 minutes, and I spend all 11 of them standing at the counter with my hands in my pockets looking at the ceiling. There is nowhere to sit, and because leaving would be an answer to a question nobody has asked yet. The person who comes back is not the clerk. She is about 50 and she has a lanyard, and she is entirely pleasant, and she tells me that the request is unusual but perfectly in order and that it will take 4 working days. Then she asks, in the warm and incurious tone of somebody making conversation at a counter, whether I have been having a problem with the registry. I tell her I have not. She says that is good, and that if I ever do, the thing to do is come and ask, because most difficulties are simply a matter of somebody not knowing where to look. I thank her and leave. I am halfway across the quad before I work out what has just happened, which is that in a building where nobody files a subject record request, filing one is itself an event. I have now generated it under my own name at a counter with a witness. 4 working days. The record, when it comes, is 9 pages of timestamps, and it is exactly as boring as it should be. Every reference I have looked up, every reference Nam Yeren has, every one of Beidousik's 6-hour sessions, all of it logged by terminal and by student identifier. It is a complete and accurate account of 4 months of work. The first 8 pages tell me nothing whatsoever that I did not already know, because I did all of it and I have most of it written down. Page 9 is a different section, and the heading on it says Disclosure Record, and it lists every occasion on which my registry activity has been disclosed to a third party. There are 19 entries. They begin in the 3rd week of the first term, and they run at intervals of roughly 7 days. The most recent is dated the Monday I settled Baydusic's obligation at the window downstairs. The requesting party is not named. In the column where a name would go, each of the 19 entries carries an internal reference beginning with the same 4 characters. The 4 characters are not explained anywhere in the packet, and I checked the packet twice. 19 weeks. Somebody has been reading what I read every week since before I had built anything worth reading. The 3rd week is the part that does the damage. In the 3rd week I had 22 accounts and no model. I had not yet found the 7 intermediaries. I had never heard of Songhae Bin. The only thing I had done that anybody could possibly have noticed was pay a boy 200 marks to talk for an hour and then start sitting in a terminal. That is not a person being investigated because they became interesting. That is a person being watched from the beginning. Nam Yerin files her own request the next day, and Gu So Young files 1-2 days after that, and we wait out the 4 working days twice more. Nam Yerin's disclosure record is empty. 4 months of registry work, hundreds of lookups, more time at that terminal than anybody in this school, and not one disclosure. Gu So Young's is empty as well. Baydusic's, when he files his, has 3 entries, and all 3 fall inside the week before the boxing club. So I sit down with the 4 records spread out on the study room table, and I do the only thing I have ever been any good at. That is to look at a set of numbers and ask what has to be true for them to look like this. Not why. What has to be true? Nam Yerin has done more registry work than I have, and generated nothing. Baydusic generated 3 disclosures in the 7 days before he was taken, which is a targeting pattern and reads exactly like one. And I have generated 19 at weekly intervals, beginning before I had done anything worth targeting and continuing without interruption through everything since. Weekly intervals do not describe an investigation. An investigation is irregular because it responds to events. Something that arrives every 7 days regardless of what the subject does is not watching for a reason. It is a subscription. Somebody set up a standing weekly report on a first year in its 3rd week and has been receiving it ever since. It ran through the model, through the 11 pages on the notice board, and through the unwinding of 316,000 marks without anybody ever once acting on it. Gu So Young says the obvious thing, which is that if they wanted to stop me, they have had 19 weeks to do it. Nam Yerin says the other obvious thing, which is that Baydusic got 3 entries and was taken within the week. The mechanism plainly can be used that way when somebody wants to use it. Which means the 19 weeks are not surveillance in the sense of watching for a threat. Nobody accumulates 19 weeks of a subscription on a threat. You accumulate 19 weeks of a subscription on a position you are holding. I go and find Cheon Baekyu. I have run out of people who might tell me something, and because he is the only person at this school who has ever given me anything for free. He is on the steps of the East Wing with a book he is not reading, and when I sit down beside him, he does not seem surprised. I put the 9 pages on the step between us with page 9 on top. He looks at the disclosure record for about 4 seconds, which is not long enough to read it and is plenty long enough to recognize it. Then he asks me what took me so long, and there is nothing unkind in it. I ask him what the 4 characters mean, and he tells me that they are an internal routing prefix and that they identify the office rather than the individual. That a great many things in this school are addressed to offices. I ask him which office. He looks out across the quad for a while and then says that he is going to answer a slightly different question, and that I should decide afterward whether it was the one I wanted. He tells me that the academy does not carry the enrollment balances on its own books. 900 students a year at 12,000 marks each is a substantial commitment, and it is underwritten the way anything of that size is underwritten, and the underwriting is renewed annually. Then he says that an underwriter with a book that size does not simply take the premium and wait. An underwriter with a book that size wants to know how the book is performing, and wants it reported at intervals. I sit on the steps of the East Wing with 9 pages of timestamps on the stone between us. The floor goes out from under me for the 2nd time since I arrived at the school. 19 weekly reports on a single student, beginning in the 3rd week, running without interruption. Never acted upon. That is not a file on a suspect. That is a performance report on an exposure. I ask him whether he is telling me that somebody insured me. Cheon Baekyu picks up the 9 pages and squares the edges and hands them back, and says that he is not telling me anything at all. That I should be careful about the word somebody, because it is doing a great deal of work in that sentence, and he does not think I have earned it yet. Then he says the last thing, and he says it while standing up and going back to his book, in the tone of a person mentioning that it might rain later. He says that the interesting question is not who is receiving the reports. The interesting question is what the reports are for, and that reports are for pricing, and that nobody prices a thing they are not intending to trade. I walk back to the West Dormitory in the dark, and I do not go inside for a while, because there is one more thing on those 9 pages, and I have been carrying it since the record arrived, and have not said it out loud to anybody. The disclosure entries run weekly from the 3rd week of term. The feed began on my first morning, on a shuttle, before I had met a single person at this academy. And in 19 weeks, the feed has reported to me on Gu So-young and Bae Dusik and Ryu Gante and Nam Yerin and Sung Habin and Cheon Baekyu and 40 other students by name. It has never once in any line reported anything at all about a man in his 40s with a staff lanyard. Either that man has never made a single decision about me across 19 weeks of receiving a weekly report on my activity, which is not credible, or the feed does not report on him because the feed is his. The work on Wai Sur-young's book turns out to be the best 4 months I have had in either of my lives, and I am aware of how that sounds. She gives me the terms on 91 positions, and I spend the first fortnight simply reading them, and by the end of it I understand her better than any conversation would have managed. She has been lending on character. Every rate on that book is a judgment about a person, and the judgments are good, and not one of them is written down anywhere except in her head. A boy who repaid early 3 times gets a rate 2 points under a boy who repaid on time 4 times. When I ask her why, she says that repaying early means he is frightened of debt, and frightened people do not default. That is a genuinely sophisticated piece of underwriting, and she arrived at it by instinct at the age of 16. She cannot teach it to anybody, which is exactly the problem she described to me in week 5. So I write it down. That is the whole of my contribution for the first 2 months, and it is not glamorous. I take the things she already knows and turn them into a form somebody else could apply. Every time I get one wrong, she tells me and I fix it. Slowly, the model stops being my model of her book and starts being her judgment, in a shape that can be handed to another person. By the 3rd month, she stops checking my rates. By the 4th, she has 2 second years working under the thing without her, and the book has gone from 91 positions to 140, and none of the new ones have failed. I like it. That is the part I did not expect and the part that eventually matters. I like sitting at that table with a stack of instruments working out which of them is going to break. I liked it at 29 in a gray office with a claims file open in front of me. And it turns out that this is simply what I am. There is a version of my life where the transmigration was the interesting thing that happened to me. Instead, the interesting thing is that I got handed a second run at the only work I was ever any good at, in a building where it has consequences. Wai Sur-young asks me about it once, near the end of the 4th month, and it is the only personal question she has ever put to me. She asks whether I am going to want the book eventually. I tell her no, and she asks why. I tell her that a person who builds the pricing and a person who carries the risk should never be the same person because the first one starts believing the second one cannot lose. She looks at me for a while and then says that this is the single most useful sentence anybody has said to her at this school. The trouble arrives in the 9th week, and it arrives as an anomaly in her funding rather than in her lending. I find it because I am reconciling her book against her balance, and the two do not agree. They should agree to the mark, because a lender's balance is what she has not lent out, and I have every instrument she holds. The gap is 19,000 marks and it is on the wrong side. She has more lent out than she has ever had. I take it to her expecting to have made an arithmetic error, and she does not react the way a person reacts to an arithmetic error. She goes very still and asks me how long I have known, and I tell her about 11 minutes. And she says that is faster than she expected and considerably faster than she hoped. Then she tells me that she borrows. She has been borrowing since the middle of her 2nd year, at a rate she describes as reasonable, from a party she will not name. Every mark of it has gone straight back out onto the book at a spread. It is the oldest structure in banking, and she reinvented it at 16, because the arithmetic is obvious once you are big enough for it to matter. Borrow at one rate, lend at a higher one, keep the difference. The whole thing works beautifully as long as nothing forces you to repay the borrowing at a moment when your own loans are still outstanding. I ask her the only question that matters, which is what the terms are on the borrowing. She tells me it is callable. Callable means the lender can demand it back at any time with no notice. It is the most dangerous word in the language for anybody in her position, and she took it because callable money is cheap money. It is cheap precisely because the person lending it is buying the right to destroy you at a moment of their choosing. I ask her how much. She says 110,000 marks. Her balance is 91,000 and her book is 140 positions, and she owes 110,000 marks to somebody who can ask for it on any morning they like. If they call it tomorrow, she cannot pay, and she cannot liquidate 140 student loans inside a day, and she would be insolvent by the afternoon. Wai Sur-young, at the top of the main hall for 2 years, 3 seizure attempts away from nothing, has been 1 telephone call from insolvency for 18 months. I ask who she borrows from, and she says that this is the part she cannot tell me. And then, after a moment, she says that it is not that she will not, it is that she does not know. The arrangement was made through an intermediary. The marks arrive when she asks for them, and she has never met the counterparty. Then she tells me the detail that makes my hands go cold. which is that the intermediary is a second year, and that the second year's name is Han Sun Woo. The same name, the fourth of the seven, the registered holder of Beidou paper for 5 days. Everything at this school runs through the same 7 people, and I have been thinking of them as a laundering chain because that is what the shape looked like from where I first saw it. A laundering chain is what it looks like from underneath. From above it is something much simpler, which is a set of counterparties operated by one desk. The desk lends and collects and holds and disperses, and it has been doing all 4 for at least 2 years. Somebody is running a bank inside the school. Why Suryong is not its rival. She is its retail branch, and I have spent 4 months making her branch more efficient. Xion Baekyu listens to the whole of it on the steps of the East Wing and does not interrupt, and at the end he says one word, which is finally. Then he tells me, without my asking and at some length, what I have been circling since the 9th day of the first term. He says the academy does not carry the balances, which he told me before, that the underwriter is not a person and not a family and not a bank in the ordinary sense, but an arrangement between several parties who each take a share of the exposure. His own family is one of them. He says that flatly and without any apparent discomfort. The underwriting is renewed annually, and the renewal is priced on performance, and performance for a book like this is not measured in marks at all, because marks are internal and worthless outside these walls. I ask him what it is measured in, and he says graduates. Then he lays it out and it takes about 4 minutes, and it rearranges everything I have built since April. Cheongram graduates roughly 900 students a year, and the underwriting parties recruit from the top of that intake on terms that would be extraordinary anywhere else. The terms are extraordinary because they are not an offer. A student who graduates solvent has demonstrated, across 3 years, that they can hold and grow standing in a closed system with no protection and no appeal, against 900 peers. The rules published and every instrument public. There is no examination anywhere that produces that information. It cannot be faked, because the whole thing is registered. And it cannot be coached, because the shapes change every year as the students invent new ones. And a student who graduates insolvent leaves carrying an enforceable debt to whoever holds their paper. Miss Okjina said that on the first morning in a pleasant administrative voice, and 900 of us heard it as a warning. It is not a warning. It is the other half of the product. The solvent are recruited and the insolvent are indentured, and both outcomes are useful, and there is no third outcome, which is why the Academy does not expel anybody and never has. I sit on the steps and think about a room built for 1,800 students that has been half empty for 15 years. I ask him why they never filled it. He says because the first intake was the experiment and the experiment worked, and doubling it would double the cost of the underwriting while having the scarcity of the graduates. Nobody involved has ever been able to make that arithmetic work. So they built for 1,800, discovered that 900 was the correct number, and left the east side standing as a monument to an assumption. Then he says the thing that puts it all in one piece. He says that a school that has a ledger uses the ledger to sort its students. A ledger that has a school uses the school to originate the ledger. Chongram is the second one and always was, and the students are not the customers and never have been. We are the underlying. I go and find Gu So-yeon that night, because there is one part of it that does not fit and she is the only person who can tell me why. I ask her what happens to a remission student who graduates solvent. She says they get recruited like everybody else. I tell her that cannot be right, because a remission student has no family behind them. The entire value of the graduate to the underwriting parties is that the graduate is provably capable and has nowhere else to go. That a capable person with nowhere else to go is not recruited on extraordinary terms. They are recruited on any terms at all. Gu So-hyang is quiet for a long moment. Then she tells me that she has known that since her first year, and that it is why she does what she does. She is not building a balance to graduate solvent. Solvency for her is not the finish line, because solvency delivers her to the same people who built the room. She has been converting standing into the only thing at this school that leaves the walls, which is the actual money that the man with the lanyard used to buy Sheng Habin. There is a market for it, and it is small and it is dangerous, and the rate is terrible. She has been running it for a year and a half, 3 targets at a time, taking only from the people who are going to be taken anyway. They are the only ones whose loss nobody investigates. I ask her how close she is. She says 11 months at the current rate, and then she says the other thing, which is that she does not intend to graduate at all. She intends to leave before the 3rd year, with enough outside the walls to be nobody's asset in either direction. Then she asks me not to tell anyone, and it is the first time since the shuttle that I have seen her ask for anything. I lie awake most of that night doing sums I do not like. 19 weekly reports on a first year, beginning in the 3rd week, before there was anything to report. A renewal priced on performance. An underwriting arrangement between several parties who each hold a share. And a boy who arrived at this academy on the first morning with a system in his head that nobody else has, which reports on the decisions other people make about him, which has never once mentioned the man with the lanyard. If the graduates are the product, then a student is a position that takes 3 years to mature. And if I am a position, then somebody has been receiving a weekly valuation on me since the 3rd week of my first term. That is not what you do with an asset you are holding. It is what you do with one you are getting ready to sell. I decided to test the feed, which I should have done in the first month and did not, because for 19 weeks I have been treating it as weather rather than as an instrument. With somebody at the other end of it, the test is simple enough to design and takes 11 days to run. If the feed reports on people who have decided something about me, then the population it draws from is defined by my own visibility. And visibility is a thing I control. So I spend 11 days making myself dramatically more visible to a specific group, and dramatically less visible to another. I take on 4 new positions from the 2nd year, all of them public and all of them registered. At the same time, I stop appearing anywhere near the 1st year floors entirely and hand every part of that work to Nam Yeren under her own name. The feed responds exactly as it should. By the 6th day, the lines are 2nd years I have never spoken to, and the 1st year names disappear. One morning, I get a line about a boy who decided to approach me 11 hours after I registered an instrument he could see. The mechanism is confirmed. The feed is not omniscient and it is not magic. It is watching the same registry everybody else can watch, plus something else that tells it what people have decided. And the something else is the part I cannot account for. Then, on the 9th day, I get a line that breaks the pattern, and it is the most useful thing the feed has ever given me. It tells me that Nam Yeren has decided to stop reporting one category of her findings to me. I read it 4 times. It is accurate because everything is always accurate. It does not say which category, and it does not say once she decided. It does not say whether she is protecting me or protecting herself, or protecting somebody else. It is the same construction I've been receiving since the shuttle, a true sentence with the load-bearing wall taken out, and for the first time I am angry about it rather than merely wary. And sitting on the floor of my room being angry about it, I finally work out what the emissions are for. I have spent 19 weeks assuming the incompleteness was a limitation, a cost of the product, the small print on a policy. It is not a limitation. Consider what a complete feed would do for me. If it told me not only that Nam Yeren had decided something, but what and why, I would act on it precisely. My actions would become a direct function of the information, and every move I made would be optimal in a way that could be traced straight back to the source. Anybody receiving a weekly report on my activity would be reading their own feed reflected back at them. An asset that can see its own valuation begins managing its valuation. That is the oldest problem in every business I have ever worked in. There is exactly one solution to it, which is to give the asset enough information to perform and not enough to price itself. The feed is not a cheat. It is a set of working instructions issued to a position, calibrated so the position moves and produces data, and calibrated so it can never see the whole board. It has been making me effective for 19 weeks. It has also been making me legible because everything I do with it is downstream of what it chose to tell me. I have been generating a beautifully clean record of exactly how a person of my type responds to partial information under pressure. 19 weekly reports. That is not surveillance of a threat, and it is not the valuation of an asset either. It is a test file. Somebody has been running me. I go to Nam Yeren and I do not accuse her of anything. I do not mention the feed because I have never told any of them where my information comes from, and this is not the week to start. I ask her instead whether there is anything she has stopped bringing me, and I ask it plainly, and I tell her that whatever the answer is, I am not going to argue with it. She puts down what she is holding. Then she tells me that for about a month she has not been passing on anything that involves the West Dormitory's 2nd floor. That the reason is that the 2nd floor is where the 4 remission students in our year live. That she worked out in September what Gu So-hyung is doing and decided not to be the person who put it into a file. She says she has been assuming I would work it out eventually and would rather I worked it out than that she handed it over. I tell her that I did work it out 3 weeks ago and that Gu So-hyung told me herself. Nam Yeren lets out a breath she has clearly been holding for a month and says that she has been extremely uncomfortable and that she does not like keeping things from me. That she also does not like the fact that everything any of us learns ends up written down in a form that somebody else could read. Then she says the sentence that stays with me for the rest of the term. That is that she has spent 4 months building the best set of records at this school and has slowly become frightened of it. She is right to be. A subject record request would put every page of it in front of whoever holds the routing prefix. So we change how the desk works. That night, in about 40 minutes. Nothing about a person's fee status goes into the file at all, and nothing about the 2nd floor, and the accounts that we hold stop carrying the names of the people who sign them. It costs us analytical power, and I sign off on the cost without arguing. Nam Yeren has correctly identified that we have been building the machine's next dataset for it and calling it our own. Then I go and find Cheon Baekyu and ask him when the renewal is. He tells me the 16th of next month, which is 5 weeks and 4 days away, and he does not ask why I want to know. Then he says in the tone of a person mentioning the weather, that renewals are usually quiet, and that the only interesting ones are the years where a party wants to change their share. I ask him whether a party wants to change their share this year. He looks out over the quad for a while and then says that his family has been reducing for 3 years, and that reducing is not the same as leaving. That when one party reduces, the others must either take up the slack or find somebody new to take it. Then he says that finding somebody new requires showing them the book, and that showing somebody the book means demonstrating that the mechanism works. And a mechanism like this one is demonstrated, I think, by pointing at a student and saying that this is what it produces. They call Wai Sir Young's loan on a Tuesday morning 11 days before the renewal. There is no warning because callable means there is no warning. A second year named Han Sun-woo delivers the notice in person at 8:40 in the morning outside her first class, politely, in front of about 15 people. It gives her 72 hours to repay 110,000 marks. She has 91,000 on the board and 140 positions outstanding. There is not a chance in the world of liquidating 140 student loans inside 3 days, because every one of those students is a 16 or 17-year-old with the marks already spent. She is holding perfectly good paper that cannot be turned into balance in 72 hours by any means available to her. She comes and finds me at 10, which is the first time she has ever come to find me. She sits down opposite me in the study room where the desk works and says that she is finished and that she wanted to tell me herself. Then she says something that I have to make her repeat. She says that the notice was delivered in front of the largest possible number of people, at the busiest hour outside the door of a class. That she has been trading with these people for 18 months and every previous communication has arrived privately, which means the call is not a collection. A collection is done quietly because a lender who wants their money back has no interest in an audience. This was staged. I sit there and turn it over, and it comes apart quickly once I stop looking at it as a debt. Wai Sir-young is not the target. Wai Sir-young is 110,000 marks of somebody else's money that has been sitting inside a very good book earning a spread. Calling it destroys a productive position for no gain whatsoever, which no lender does without a reason that is not about the money. The staging is the reason. Somebody wanted 900 students to watch the top name on the board receive a notice she cannot answer. It falls 11 days before a renewal at which the mechanism has to be demonstrated to a new party. They are not collecting a loan, they are producing an exhibit, and I have spent 4 months making her book more efficient, which means I have spent 4 months increasing the size and the visibility and the credibility of the exhibit. The 19 weekly reports have been tracking my progress at doing it. Wai Sir-young is watching my face and she says quietly that I have thought of something. I tell her that I have thought of 2 things. The first is that we have 72 hours and no way of finding 110,000 marks. That is true, and which I say first because she needs to hear that I am not going to lie to her about the position. The second is that whoever is doing this needs her to fail in public in 11 days. That a party who needs an event to happen on a particular date is the most exposed thing in any market I have ever worked in. We spend the first of the 72 hours doing the obvious thing, which is looking for 110,000 marks, and we find 11,000 of it and stop. Then I put a line through the whole approach, because the obvious thing is a trap, and I have walked into enough of them this year to recognize the shape from a distance. Somebody who calls a loan they do not need repaid, in public, 11 days before a date that matters to them, has not made a mistake about the timing. The timing is the instrument. Every hour we spend chasing marks is an hour spent inside a problem that was designed for us to be inside. The only reliable thing about a designed problem is that the exit is never where the designer put the door. So I ask a different question. That is what the event actually has to look like on the 16th, for it to be worth the 110,000 marks they are destroying to produce it. Cheon Baekyu told me that a party reducing its share forces the others to find somebody new, and that showing somebody new the book means demonstrating that the mechanism works. That is a sales meeting. What is being sold is a machine that reliably sorts 900 children a year into the recruitable and the indentured. The proof on offer is the most legible student at this academy going from the top of the main hall to insolvency inside 3 days, for reasons no observer will be able to reconstruct. It is a very good demonstration. It says the machine is total, that even the best positioned student inside it is holding her standing at the sufferance of the desk, and that the sorting cannot be gamed. And every part of that demonstration depends on the audience not being able to see the mechanism. That is the whole exposure, not the marks and not the date. They need 900 students to watch Wai Sir-young fall and to conclude, as the first year concluded about the boy who walks slowly across the assembly stage, that the lesson is about strength. If 900 students watch the same event and understand exactly what produced it, the demonstration does not merely fail, it reverses, because a mechanism you can see is a mechanism you can price, and nobody buys a share of a book whose customers have started doing arithmetic. I put it to the 4 of them in the study room at 2 in the morning. Nam Yeren says the thing I have been waiting for somebody to say, which is that I tried this in October and it recruited for the other side. She is right and I tell her so. In October, I put 200 copies of The Truth outside the dining hall, and the first year read it and join the arrangement in greater numbers than before. Because what I gave them was a description of how powerful the machine was. Gu So Yang told me afterward that I keep confusing the thing that is true with the thing that is useful, and I have had 4 months to work out what the useful version looks like. The useful version is not an expose. Nobody at the school needs to be told they are being farmed, because they have all known since the first month, and the knowledge has never once helped anybody. What nobody here has ever had is the ability to price themselves. So we do not publish the story, we publish the model. Not the loss table, which is a description of what has already happened to other people. The scoring instrument, the working one, the thing that has been running Wai Seryong's book for 4 months and has not put a foot wrong in 140 positions. Anybody can run it on themselves in about 90 seconds with a pencil. It asks 11 questions and it returns a number, and the number is the probability that the person answering will lose meaningful standing inside the next term. And because it was built from 22 signed accounts and the registered instruments underneath them, it works on the 4 shapes without ever naming them. It works on the arrangement, and it works on any new script anybody invents next year, because it does not model the predator at all. It models the conditions that make a student takeable. It will tell a boy on the 3rd floor that his score is high, and it will tell him which of the 11 answers is carrying the weight. It will tell him that a member of an arrangement that charges monthly for protection scores 3 points worse than a non-member with the same profile. That is a fact we have had in the data since November and have never been able to say in a way anybody would use. Bae Duzik reads the draft twice and then says, in a completely ordinary voice, that if he had run this in September he would not have gone to the boxing club. Nobody says anything for a moment. Then he asks whether he can be the one to hand it out, and I tell him that he can. Nam Yaren looks at me across the table and neither of us says the other part, which is that this is the first thing he has volunteered for since Wednesday of the 11th week. We'd put it out on the Thursday, 36 hours into the 72, and we do not put it on a notice board. That was the other mistake in October. A notice board has an author, and an author can be answered, and 200 stacked copies of a document outside a dining hall is a person making a claim in public. What we do instead is give it away. 400 copies go out over 4 hours by 11 people, at floor level, in corridors and stairwells in the queue for lunch. Each one is handed to somebody who is told only that it takes 90 seconds, and that they should run it on themselves before they do anything else this term. There is no name on it. There is no accusation in it. There is nothing in it that requires anybody to believe anything about anybody. It is a page of 11 questions and a scoring table, and a student who does not trust it can check it against their own life and the time it takes to walk to class. By the Friday morning, it has been copied by hand more times than we distributed it. I do not fully understand why until Gu So Young explains it to me, and her explanation is the best piece of analysis anybody has given me at this school. She says that everybody here has spent their whole time at Xianggram being told what happened to other people, and that a story about somebody else is something you consume. A number about yourself is something you own. The first thing a person does with a score is check it, and the second thing they do is show it to a friend, and the third thing they do is argue about it. Every one of those 3 actions spreads the instrument further than any amount of evidence about a protection racket ever could. By Friday afternoon, there are students in the dining hall running each other through the 11 questions out loud. The call is withdrawn at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, 8 hours before the deadline, and the notice of withdrawal is delivered privately. Of course it is delivered privately. Everything about that desk is delivered privately except the one thing that was staged. The staging is the tell, and by Saturday morning there is no version of the 16th in which Wai Seryong falling in public produces the demonstration they needed. The audience has spent 72 hours learning to ask what conditions make a student takeable. 140 of her borrowers have run an instrument that tells them, among other things, that a lender whose funding is callable is a lender whose paper is about to get complicated. 11 of them have already come to her to refinance on longer terms because the model told them to. Her book did not collapse. It extended. Wai Seryong reads the withdrawal notice twice and then puts it face down on the table and says that she does not understand why they stopped. I tell her that they stopped because the exhibit stopped working, and she says that she understands that part. What she does not understand is why they let it stop working, when they had 4 days and considerable resources and could have simply taken the model out of circulation. I tell her the truth, which is that you cannot take it out of circulation. It is 11 questions in a table, and it is now written in 400 notebooks in the handwriting of the people who own them. There is no copy to seize. It stopped being a document on Friday morning and became a thing that students at this school know how to do. Then she asks the question she has been holding since Tuesday. That is what happens to her borrowing now, and whether a lender who has been publicly embarrassed will simply call it again next term with better staging. I tell her that this is the part I want to talk about, and that I have an answer she is not going to like. The answer is that she should stop borrowing entirely and shrink the book to what her own balance supports, which is a little over 90,000 marks in about 60 positions. That she should do it over the next 2 terms and take the reduction in income and be by the middle of next year roughly half the size she is now. She looks at me as though I have suggested she set fire to it. So I explain it the way I would have explained it at 29 to a board that did not want to hear it. A business whose funding can be withdrawn at a moment chosen by somebody who benefits from withdrawing it is not a business. It is a position held at somebody else's discretion, and the spread she has been earning for 18 months is not profit. It is the fee she has been paid for carrying a risk she cannot see, cannot price, and cannot exit. She has been the most successful student at this academy for 2 years, while holding an instrument that could have ended her on any morning. The only reason it is not is that she was more useful in place. Then I tell her the part that actually persuades her, which is that a smaller book funded entirely by her own balance cannot be called by anybody. That in a school where every other structure runs on borrowed standing, the only genuinely independent position is the one that owes nothing to anyone. She is quiet for a long time. Then she says that she has been top of that board for 2 years and has never once been able to say what she was on top of. We do the arithmetic together that afternoon, and she starts unwinding on the Monday. The 16th comes and goes and nothing happens on it at all, which is how I know it worked. There is no announcement because there was never going to be one, and whatever meeting took place happened somewhere none of us will ever see. Cheon Baekyu tells me afterward that the renewal completed and that the shares moved, and that his family reduced again. That the new party took a smaller position than had been discussed in the spring. He tells me this on the steps of the East Wing in the flat light of a Tuesday afternoon. When I ask him whether smaller is because of us, he says that he genuinely does not know, that anybody who tells me they can trace a single decision at that level back to a single cause is selling something. Then he says that he is leaving at the end of the year, transferring out, and that his family has been arranging it since the summer. I ask him whether that is because of the reduction. He says it is the other way around, and does not elaborate. I decide not to push it. He has given me more for free than anybody at this school, and because I have finally learned to stop performing my own cleverness at people who are being generous. He asks me, before he goes back inside, what I am going to do with the second year. I tell him I have not decided. He says that is the first time I have answered a question of his without doing arithmetic first, and that he considers it an improvement. Seong Habin comes back in the last week of term, exactly as he said he would, and asks the same question he asked at 6:30 in the morning 8 months ago. He wants to know what I want from him. He has asked it every few weeks since April, patiently, without resentment, the way a person confirms a standing arrangement. Every time I have told him nothing, and every time he has said he does not believe me and will ask again. This time, I tell him something different. I tell him that there is one thing, and that it is not repayment, and that he can refuse it without any consequence. I ask him to sit at the terminal and read the disclosure records. Not his own, which is empty, and not mine, which I already have. All of them. Any student can request their own. That means any student can request their own and give me the result, and 400 students at this academy now trust an 11-question instrument that arrived without a name on it. If even a fraction of them file the request and hand over page 9, we will have something nobody has ever had. That is a map of who at this school is being reported on and at what intervals and to which routing prefixes. I tell him it would take months, that it is dull beyond description, and that it is the single most valuable piece of work available to anybody in this building. Sung Habin thinks about it for a while. Then he says that he was a piece of infrastructure that walked to class for 11 months, that he would like to be a piece of infrastructure that reads, and that this is the first time anybody has offered him a job rather than a position. He starts on the Monday. By the end of the following term, he has 206 records and the beginnings of something that frightens me. Name Yeren repays the 12,000 marks in March in one transfer and refuses to discuss the source. I do discover it eventually, because I run a desk and the desk keeps records and I am not capable of not looking. She has spent 4 months quietly building the least glamorous business at this academy, which is that she reads instruments for other students before they sign them. 80 marks a document. She has done 411 of them. There is no leverage in it, and no risk and no scale, and it will never make her rich. She has taken a girl who was insolvent by the end of her first day and turned her into the person 900 students go to before they put their name on anything. When I finally mention it, she says that she wanted to repay it with money that came from the thing that happened to her, rather than from the thing that was done about it. I decide not to say anything clever in response. She is still on the desk. She runs it now in every way that matters, and I sign what she puts in front of me. Gu So-hyung leaves in the second week of the summer term, without telling anybody, and I find out from an empty seat. She sends one message, 3 days later, through a route I will not describe, and it is 4 sentences long. She says she is out, and that the balance outside the walls was enough. She says she stopped at 11 targets in the end, and that the last 3 were people who had already been taken twice by the arrangement. That she wants me to know the number, because she is aware that I keep records, and would rather the record was accurate than kind. Then she says that she does not expect to be forgiven for any of it, and is not asking to be. The last sentence says that the 11 questions were the right answer, and that she wishes somebody had handed her that page in her own first month, and that she thinks I know that already. I keep it. I do not know what else to do with it. She broke 3 people's schedules and keys in her first year to farm their gratitude, and took 11 students' balances across 2 years. She also put up the difference on Seung Ha-bin's 12,000 marks without being asked, and without staying to be thanked. Told me the truth about the remission lists when she had every reason not to, and warned me about the free bank when it cost her something to do it. Both of those are the whole person. I have stopped trying to put them in separate rooms. Bae Doo-sik gets it back slowly, and not all of it, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. He works on the desk. He is still the best person in this building at sitting at a terminal for 6 hours, and he still notices the things that are not numbers. He still tells everybody everything, which turned out to be a feature the moment we started handing out an instrument we wanted copied. What is gone is that he no longer walks into a room assuming it is friendly. He checks now. It takes about 1.5 seconds, and you would not see it unless you knew him before December, and I see it every time. He asks me once, in the spring, whether it was his fault, and I tell him that it was mine. He says that he does not agree, and neither of us moves the other one. The feed keeps coming at 8 every morning. 3 lines. Always true and always incomplete, and I have stopped resenting it. That is the thing I would go back and tell myself on the shuttle, if the shuttle were a place I could get to. I spent a year trying to complete it. Every line it ever gave me, I went looking for the missing half, and I found the half often enough to keep believing that finding it was the work. It was not the work. The missing half is structural. It is there so that I move without being able to see my own price, and no amount of digging will ever produce a morning where the 3 lines are whole, which leaves exactly one thing to do with an information source that will never be complete. It is not a clever thing, and it took me a year and a boy I hired in the first week to learn it. You stop building positions that require you to be right. You build positions that survive being wrong. Nam Yeren's desk works whether or not I know who is watching. Why Suryoung's smaller book cannot be called by anybody whatever the desk decides in the spring. 400 students with 11 questions in a notebook do not need me to have understood the machine correctly. Every one of those pays out under all the completions rather than under one of them. It is not the cheat I thought I had been given on the first morning. It is better, because it is mine. The feed does something new on the morning after the 16th, and I am not ready for it. It arrives at 8, on time, in the same pale blue, and there is one line where there are always 3. I sit on the floor with my back against the bed and read it, and then I get up and read it again standing. Then I go and stand at the window for a while with the light coming up over the quad. It says that a man whose name I have never been given has decided to meet me. He has held a routing prefix and a staff lanyard, and 19 weeks of reports on a boy who did not know he was a position. There is no time on it, and no place and no reason. Of course there is not. It is a true sentence with the load-bearing wall taken out, delivered by an instrument built to keep me moving and keep me legible. It will not tell me what he wants, or what he has decided, or which of the 2 of us asked for this. But for 19 weeks and then 31 more, that man made no decision about me at all. Because a person does not decide about a position. A position is held, and reported on, and priced, and eventually traded, and none of that requires deciding anything. He has decided something now, which means that somewhere above all of this, at a desk I have never seen, my file stopped being an exposure this week and became a counterparty. And I have spent an entire year learning that the only thing worth knowing about anybody at this academy is what they cannot afford to have seen. I would very much like to know what he thinks he is walking into.